Chapter 122. There weren't many masters of the Lu residence. Other than Lu Shi, the second lady, Madame Hu, and the second Lang Jun, there were only the two concubines and their sons and daughters, who rarely appeared in public. The masters had gentle temperaments and would not deliberately make the work of the servants more difficult. In addition, the rules and regulations left by the late wife were clear, so as long as the servants of the Lu mansion completed their tasks, they would have plenty of free time to rest. Tong Sanyang was on her way to the embroidery workshop to buy a new batch of embroidery thread when she passed by a corner gate. What do you think happened in Tsang Prefecture and Meng County? The new purchasing manager of the Lu residence and a few people dressed like commoners were whispering at the corner gate. Tong Sanyang happened to hear the entire conversation. The manager was a little angry at first, but when he saw that it was Tong Sanyang, he couldn't help but put on a flattering smile. He cupped his hands and bowed, "Aunt Tong." Tong Sanyang was 21 years old and unmarried. According to Dongqing's laws, she had to pay an extra tax. Her brother and sister-in-law felt embarrassed and forcefully forced her to get married. She agreed and went to plead with Madame Hu, persuading her to set up her own household. This was the first time in the entire Lu residence. She had Madame Hu's support, so the other managers didn't dare to offend her. Tong Sanyang's expression was cold. "You mentioned Tsang Prefecture and Meng County. What's going on?" The merchants who were stared at by her felt pressured. They lowered their heads and whispered, This, speak." The merchant broke out in a cold sweat and said quickly, "We are traveling merchants from Meng County in Tsang Prefecture. Your mansion ordered a batch of goods from our master, but they were robbed by a group of refugees and bandits when they were delivered. We are here to ask for your grace to be more lenient on the deadline. We didn't mean to delay your time, but Meng County is in a mess now. Looting and burning are everywhere. They were just a group of ordinary merchants. How could they resist the robberies? Even though the Lu residence wasn't big, their food, clothing, and necessities were all exquisite. Every year, they needed to purchase a lot of goods, and they were generous. They were big customers, but the goods they sent were robbed before they could even leave Meng County. Now that they couldn't return the goods, they could only come to the Lu residence to negotiate." After hearing this, Tong Sanyang felt like she had lost her ability to speak. If something had happened in another county, she wouldn't have lost her composure like this, but the problem was, that was Meng County, Tsang Prefecture. "When did this happen?" Tong Sanyang asked coldly. The commoners bowed their heads and answered honestly, but they didn't expect Tong Sanyang to sneer at them. Although Meng County in Tsang Prefecture is within Tsang Prefecture, it is not very far from Hejian County. It will only take half a month to travel between the two counties at top speed. Such a big thing happened in Meng County. Why hasn't Hejian County heard anything about it after so long? The merchants complained incessantly. They had a lot of bitterness in their hearts, but they had no place to vent it. "Aunt Tong, this incident has been known for a long time. However, the Meng army has gone too far. They don't allow refugees to enter and leave Meng County as they wish, and they also don't allow this news to spread. We wanted to transport the goods out, but we were stopped. After much difficulty, we managed to get the customs documents, but we were robbed by the mob." As they spoke of the sad part, the men were in a sorry state. The money that the Lu residents earned from the goods they ordered every year was enough for them to live on for half a year. Now that the goods were robbed by the mob, they lost their goods and money, and they almost died on the way to Hejian County. Their days were like hell, and just thinking about it made them sad. If the Lu residents felt that they were wasting time and asked for compensation, then their losses would be even greater. Tong Sanyang's face turned solemn, and her palms were sweaty. She seemed to remember something. "This matter is of great importance, and we need Master's attention. How about this? Let the steward take you to wash up, and I will report this to Master. If you have anything to say, you can tell master later. When Tong Sanyang told Lu Shi about the incident, he was burning incense and practicing calligraphy. He was surrounded by a tranquil atmosphere. He put down the brush in his hand without changing his expression. If that's the case, let's ask those people to come here. He was wondering why only a few people knew about such a big incident in Meng County. It turned out that the Meng army had intentionally blocked the news. The Meng army? Ha! Lu Shi felt a flash of coldness in his heart, and a murderous look flashed across his calm eyes. How could you have such a day? Nay! The horse let out a long sigh, and the carriage slowed down until it stopped in front of the Lu residence. Jiang Pengji got out of the carriage and jumped off before the coachman could bring the bench. She saw that there was an unfamiliar carriage parked in front of the door. She frowned and asked the gatekeeper. Is there a guest? The gatekeeper answered respectfully, Second Lang Jun, it's the lady's maiden family. Mother's side? Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows. I wonder who it is. Because Lu Shi had gone to Hu County to take up his post, the women in the family rarely went out. They rarely interacted with Lu Shi's family, not to mention the second lady's maiden family in Langyi County. They would only interact with each other during festivals, but they rarely interacted with each other. Wild beasts had a strong desire to possess their own territory. They would sense the presence of a stranger. Although Jiang Pengji had not reached that level yet, along the way, there were indeed some unfamiliar traces in the Lu residence that should not have been there, which made her unhappy. Before she entered the house, she could already hear the soft and sweet voice of a young girl coming from inside. The young girl looked to be about 13 or 14 years old, wearing a pink dress. Her eyebrows were like the mountains in the distance, and her skin was like a peach blossom with a smile. Her cheeks carried a bit of baby fat, making her look even younger. Her eyes seemed to be filled with a clear spring, clear and bright. Her nose was tall and straight, and her cherry lips were red even though they weren't dotted, causing one to be unable to help but think of the blooming peach blossoms under the spring sun. TSK, another budding lowly. Uncle, is this cousin Lanting? The girl asked Lu Shi with a smile when she turned her head to see Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji did not need to look at the streaming room to know that the bullet screen was full of screams and howls. No matter which world it was, there was no shortage of good-looking people. You are courting death, oh, so cute. She has a clear voice and a soft body. She's a pure, natural lowly. Lo Siji Lianmeng, I've realized that, so far, the overall appearance of the host's world is really good. There are almost no crooked people. At the very least, they have good facial features. Stop crying. It's a paradise for those who are obsessed with looks. Jiang Pengji glanced at the girl coldly. Host V, what's so cute about a stick? Everyone in the streaming room was dumbfounded. Chapter 123. What does that mean? I understand. Jiang Pengji pretended to be cold, but Lu Shi smiled. Yes, this is Lanting. He didn't want to continue the introduction. The girl seemed to realize that, and she looked embarrassed. Jiang Pengji sat down. She seemed to be looking at the tea in her cup, but she was actually sizing up the girl and Lu Shi. There was nothing much to say about the girl. She pretended to be smart, but she was full of flaws. Jiang Pengji believed that even if the girl was blind, she would still be able to smell the unbearable stench on her. What was interesting was Lu Shi's attitude. Even though the man maintained a seemingly intimate but actually distant smile and treated the guest seriously, from his eyes and the slight changes in his facial muscles, as well as the movements of his fingers, it was clear that he hated the girl very much. No. It was not enough to say that he hated her. It was more like finding the dishes on New Year's Eve filled with rotting animal corpses and other creatures' excrement. It was disgusting. The girl seemed to want to talk about Jiang Pengji, but Lu Shi steered the topic away. The two seemed to be friendly, but they talked for a long time. Finally, the girl talked about the main purpose of the visit. She wanted to see the second lady. Jiang Pengji thought Lu Shi would refuse or delay, but she didn't expect him to agree without thinking. She frowned and took the initiative to say to Lu Shi, "The doctor said that my mother is depressed, and it's not good for her to recover. I think she will be happier if she hears that someone from her family is here. You haven't been here for a long time, so I'm afraid you don't know much about the place. I'm overstepping my boundaries. I'll take you to my mother's place." Lu Shi frowned, but he didn't say anything. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Jiang Pengji caught the girl's gaze as if she had eyes on the back of her head. The girl blushed. "Lanting, the emperor is walking in front. How can you say that I'm peeking at you?" Jiang Pengji said coldly, "Oh." Everyone was dumbfounded. The viewers in the streaming room were waiting for her to gain favor with the Lolita. "Ho Dandan, streamer, you can't be like this. QWQ should communicate more with lowly girls. Zhenggang, I feel that the host's reaction is not quite right. She seems to be holding back some big move. Lo Siji Lianmeng, can I say that as an old driver, I already understand the host's intention?" There was something fishy about that girl. The keywords, old driver, and the young lady is fishy. Extended, it meant that the words Jiang Pengji had just said were meaningful. All of a sudden, all the viewers in the live streaming channel expressed, "Thinking about it is terrifying." However, there were also innocent children who didn't understand and asked questions. Yiguagwangspata Jupi, why do I feel like you all understand? Can someone explain? Everyone expressed that it was rare to find a clean and pure seedling among a group of dirty old drivers, so it was better not to pollute it. Unexpectedly, Jiang Pengji intervened. "Host V, you'll know when you're old enough. Eating grapes, spitting grape skin, eh?" There were so many bullet screens, but the host saw me and even replied. I felt so honored. Jiang Pengji smiled in her heart. She didn't just pay attention to one person's bullet screen. She saw everyone's bullet screen clearly. The two of them were quite lucky. The second lady had just woken up and seemed to be in good spirits. Hearing Jiang Pengji's message, the second lady was slightly startled. She frowned and said, "Help me up." She sat in front of the dressing table and looked at her haggard face in the bronze mirror. Her expression was indifferent as she let the maid help her with her makeup. Her long hair was tied up in a bun. Because she was still sick, she didn't have many accessories on. She only wore 2 hairpins for decoration, so she didn't look too shabby. She had changed out of her wrinkled pajamas and changed into casual clothes that still had the fragrance of honey locust. With the help of the maid, she no longer looked haggard and tired. Instead, she looked more languid and elegant. "That's good. Let's go see that." The second madam's tone was stiff for a moment before a beautiful smile bloomed on her face. She gave off a domineering and oppressive aura. "My good niece." The second lady's strong aura was similar to the arrogant Madame Hu. For a moment, some of the inexperienced maids muttered to themselves, but they didn't dare to express their thoughts. Instead, they were even more respectful. Jiang Pengji saw the tidied-up second lady sitting in the main seat of the main room. Her eyebrows twitched. What she feared would come true. "Mother, you look much better than yesterday," Jiang Pengji said calmly. Jiang Pengji said calmly. She wanted to block the line of sight between the girl and the second lady. Unfortunately, the body she was in was that of a 12-year-old child. It had yet to fully develop, and it was almost a head shorter than the girl behind it. "And this is?" The second lady nodded and looked at Jiang Pengji lovingly. When she saw a familiar girl behind Jiang Pengji, her smile stiffened uncontrollably. She quickly regained her composure and teased Jiang Pengji with a smile, which family are you from? You look so beautiful and adorable. Could it be that you brought her here today because you're pleased with her? It was Jiang Pengji's turn to be speechless. She said with a straight face, "Mother, please don't tease me anymore. I don't want to ruin her reputation." Could it be that the maidservant who notified Mother just now didn't tell Mother clearly that there's a guest at home today and it's a cousin from Mother's maiden family? The second lady covered her mouth with her handkerchief and chuckled. She glanced at Jiang Pengji. "You've really grown up. Can't I tease you a little?" After saying that, the second lady shifted her gaze to the girl. She looked at her from head to toe without batting an eyelid. She had a familiar expression on her face. "You look very familiar. I wonder which sister you are. Why did they allow you, a girl, to come all the way to Hejian County?" The girl turned her head to look at Jiang Pengji awkwardly. She pulled her handkerchief nervously and looked at the second lady longingly. What was going on? She was hinting that it was inappropriate for an outsider like her to be present if she had something important to say to the second lady. Jiang Pengji looked at the girl's movements and eyes in silence. She sneered in her heart. She was smart enough to see through the girl's hint. However, she didn't want to follow the girl's wishes. She refused to move and didn't give her a chance to talk to the second lady alone. The atmosphere was awkward. In the end, the second lady asked Jiang Pengji to leave. Although she was sent out, her 5 senses were heightened at this moment. Even though she was 30 to 50 meters away, she could still clearly hear the conversation between the two people in the room. It wasn't that she had any ulterior motives, but she was worried about the second lady. After making sure that Jiang Pengji was far away, the second lady looked at the girl. "You've grown up." As soon as the second lady opened her mouth, the girl suddenly knelt down and kneeled in front of the second lady. Her voice was choked with emotion. "Mother. I miss you." Chapter 124. Mother? Son? The spectators were so shocked that they dropped their melon seeds. With the help of the special hidden camera angle of the streaming system, the audience in the streaming room could clearly see what was happening in the room even if they did not have Jiang Pengji's 5 senses. They expressed that they were all scared out of their wits. "You're courting death, I'm scared to death." Could it be that the girl is the original owner of the host's body? If she wasn't the original owner of this body, why would she call the second Madam Mother? At first glance, this logic seemed to be somewhat interesting. However, if one thought about it for a bit, they would know that it was nonsense. Lo Siji Lianmeng, pft, now is not the time to worry about this, right? Didn't you hear that sound? Although the young man's voice was still changing and it was difficult to distinguish whether he was male or female, if one listened carefully, one could still distinguish that there was a big difference between a male and female voice. The voice that the youth blurted out just now was clearly that of a youth, not a girl. In other words, Jiang Pengji's sh*t stir had a deeper meaning. She was really a girl. The viewers in the live stream room clutched their chests, expressing that they were hurt, feeling that they had fallen into a trap. Why would a man dress up as a girl? They could understand cosplay as a hobby, but it shouldn't be built on the basis of hurting their young hearts. Where's your sincerity? Fed to the dogs? It was as if someone had finally managed to hook up with a goddess. After going through a lot of trouble, the two of them agreed on a time, entered the room, and even took off their pants. In the end, the goddess told him that she was a man with a penis and that he could only endure it. Smiley face 3, angle, Wanyan Lulakan, where's the basic trust between people? What about trust? What about trust? Why did they have to hurt each other? Of course, there were also people who were gloating. Cafeteria Daffin Auntie, it's so cute. It must be blue boy paper, */w***. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Can you straighten your tongue before you speak? It didn't take me much effort to get it. I thought I would have to turn the entire Hejian County upside down. I didn't expect it to come to me. She casually plucked a leaf, wiped it clean, and held it in her mouth. She had a sloppy look on her face, without the slightest hint of elegance. The system was puzzled. What do you mean by that? Jiang Pengji secretly rolled her eyes. Do you still remember what happened yesterday? He is the leader I'm looking for. He's Meng Liang. The system was so shocked that it typed a few exclamation marks. So he's trying to sneak into the Lu residence and cause trouble? I'm afraid that's not his main purpose for coming to the Lu mansion. Jiang Pengji said calmly, rather than saying that he sneaked in, it's better to say that he moved in openly. His purpose is to get the Lus to help him conceal his identity. Don't forget that Meng Liang is being chased by a captain who disappeared. Maybe that captain is just hiding and following him, waiting for an opportunity to assassinate him. But, how did you know he was Meng Liang? The system expressed that it had initially thought that the other party was a pure girl. Judging from her initial attitude, she should have seen through his disguise the first time they met. If it had not happened last night, the expression on Meng Liang's head would have been, a man dressed as a woman with a promiscuous private life. But Jiang Pengji had already known about Meng Liang's actions. She did not kill him the moment they met, which was something to be thankful for. Jiang Pengji said lightly, with your IQ, I think it's hard to explain. The system, F***CK. Mother. I miss you. The girl, no, Meng Liang could not stop crying. In comparison, the second wife's reaction was more thought-provoking. You have your own parents to love you. Who am I, your mother? She looked down, as if she had seen through the mortal world, but there was a hint of sadness and pity in her eyes. Meng Liang, who had been observing her in secret, saw it. Mother, are you reprimanding me for not being filial and forcing me to die? Meng Liang's eyes were red as he bit his lower lip and whispered, Mother, you're a good person. After separating from father, you got married. Did you think about my situation with brother in the Meng family? That sentence was like a sharp, snow-white knife, piercing into the second madam's heart. A fatal stab. That lowly servant girl instigated father all these years. Not only did she suppress and treat brother harshly, she also supported our son both openly and secretly. Not only did she cause dissension between our son and brother, she also intentionally turned our son into a playboy until he committed a grave mistake. What a vicious scheme to kill two birds with one stone. The second wife looked down at Meng Liang, who was kneeling on the ground and holding back his tears. She said coldly, You've seen it clearly. Mother, you have to save me this time. Meng Liang looked up, his face full of tears. If mother did not do anything, I would not have been able to live. Mother. I beg you, you have to save me. I'm not afraid of death, I just don't want to die with a bad reputation. If I die, that B***TCH will not let brother go. The second wife raised her hand to her forehead. Her head was throbbing. A man doesn't cry easily. You're crying like this. What's the difference between you and a girl? That B***TCH is good. She raised you into a man who is neither a man nor a woman. You don't have the noble bearing of Duke Meng. You know she's trying to kill you by flattering you. Why didn't you control yourself? Instead, you chose to indulge yourself? Her voice became stern and she scolded him. Meng Liang looked respectful on the surface, but he was secretly clenching his fists. The second wife's heart softened. Tell me, what did you do this time? Mother, don't be angry. I didn't want this to happen. Meng Liang quickly said, although I know she's trying to kill me by flattering me, I've been wearing this mask for too long. In the end, I can't tell who is who. I swear to you that I did not do those heartless things. That B**tch deliberately framed me. She wanted to destroy me completely to pave the way for the baby in her belly. Get to the point. The second wife's chest was heaving up and down. She seemed to be angry. Meng Liang mumbled about what happened in Tsang Prefecture's Meng County. However, when it came out of his mouth, he had another explanation. The death of the commandant's wife and daughter really had nothing to do with me. That was clearly a false accusation. But because of my ridiculous behavior, everyone in the Meng family believed it was true. That B**tch even hit me when I was down. Father said that he doesn't have a son anymore. He even wanted to use rattan to beat me to death. If I hadn't pretended to be a maid and escaped, I'm afraid I would have been. At this point, Meng Liang's body trembled. He seemed to remember the feeling of being beaten by rattan. Chapter 125. A genius in a second. Remember to go away? We provide you with exciting novels to read. Wan Yin Lolakan, listening to their conversation, I suddenly feel sorry for the boy named Meng Liang. His mother divorced his father at a young age, and he seems to have an evil stepmother. Most of the ridiculous things he did after that were led by someone else. Even if he's responsible, it's only 50%. After all, it's hard for a child to survive without his mother's protection in ancient times. Cafeteria Daphne Auntie, seeing him cry so pitifully makes my heart ache. He was almost beaten to death by his father, and he had to disguise himself as a woman to escape. After escaping, he took the blame and was chased by some military officer. He's still young, just a kid. People with good looks were always more likely to receive preferential treatment. After learning about Meng Liang's tragic experience, a large number of viewers in the streaming room switched sides and expressed their sympathy for the boy. Of course, there were also a small number of viewers who disagreed with the sentiment. Tudu Faccio, smiley face 3, angle, although I was also shaken, the host didn't seem to have any reaction. I even felt that the smile on her face was a little sarcastic. Based on my trust in the host's intelligence, I felt that Meng Liang didn't deserve any sympathy. Lanky Yubuz, I agree. If I don't want to be slapped in the face by the plot twist, I'd better take the host's side. Jiang Pengji held a leaf in her mouth, multitasking. She watched the bullet screen while paying attention to the touching meeting between the mother and son in the room. At the same time, a bunch of data about the second lady flashed in her mind, slowly forming a clear outline. Up until the end of the mother and son conversation, what Jiang Pengji was worried about didn't happen. Meng Liang behaved the whole time. That night, when the second lady came out to have dinner with her family, Madame Hu said that she wasn't feeling well. The two of them were like kings who didn't see each other. Jiang Pengji followed the rule of not talking during meals and finished a portion of food for 3 people. She forgot to mention that when the maid served her, the rice in the bowl was compacted, and the meat and vegetable dishes were plentiful. Maybe, it was more than 3 people's portions? Thinking about how the others ate like cats, she felt that she probably ate 4 or 5 people's portions. Although Meng Liang was the second lady's son, he was still considered an outsider in the Lu manor and couldn't stay in the inner court for too long. Father. Jiang Pengji sat in front of the desk and practiced her handwriting. It was better to have someone to teach her. At least her handwriting had improved a lot. Lu, she grunted in response. She put down her pen and asked seriously, that Meng Liang, is he really mother's biological son? Lu Shi's eyes flashed with a hint of playfulness and helplessness. Nominally, that should be the case. On the other hand, it isn't? Jiang Pengji asked. Lu Shi was choked by the rhetorical question, but he didn't want to reveal everything so quickly. He still wanted to struggle. Yes or no, what's the difference between the two? If it is, leave his corpse intact and give him the last bit of dignity. If it isn't, he will naturally die without a complete corpse. Leaving him alive is just a waste of food. Jiang Pengji wouldn't take the initiative to poke her nose into other people's business, but it was a different story if someone took the initiative to bump into her. Lu Shi focused on the former and asked in disbelief, "If Meng Liang was really your aunt's son, why would you think that I wouldn't?" Jiang Pengji looked at him in confusion. "Does it have anything to do with family?" Lu Shi was stumped by the question. Legally, it didn't have anything to do with the family, but what about the family? Jiang Pengji took a sip of tea to moisten her tongue. "What you said just now also shows that Meng Liang isn't." It's impossible to argue with a non-existent hypothesis over an impossible question. She felt like she had nothing better to do. Lu Shi couldn't help but blush when he heard what she didn't finish. Meng Liang did evil, so someone will punish him. Even if Meng Liang did deserve to die, he didn't understand why his daughter was so eager to kill him. For justice? First of all, Meng Liang is a child of the Mengs. He is loved by his parents and elders. Look at how much trouble he caused in Tsang Prefecture. How did the Mengs deal with him? He was secretly sent out of Tsang Prefecture to seek protection in Shangjing. In other words, Meng Liang is someone the Mengs must protect. The government still has to rely on the Mengs' reputation, and the Mengs also need to guard Tsang Prefecture. So how could Meng Liang die? Meng Liang escaped from Tsang Prefecture and even had the mood to harm the girls in Hejian County. How was he in danger? As for seeking protection from the Lus, half of the reason was that he was being hunted by the county military officer. With Lu Shi's influence in Hejian County, the county military officer couldn't do anything to him, so Meng Liang could rest easy. The other reason was that he had his eyes on the women of the Lus. Lu Shi had to admit that what Jiang Pengji said was true, but he didn't think it was a reason for her to want Meng Liang's life. "I don't want to hear these high-sounding reasons. Tell me what's on your mind." "There are 3 reasons. First, a cockroach jumped into my house. Can't I slap it to death? Second, Meng Liang entered the house under the guise of my mother's daughter. That identity can save his life, but it can also kill him. It's a good opportunity, and I don't want to miss it. Even if someone died, it would be the second lady's niece." What did it have to do with Meng Liang? What's the third reason? Lu Shi thought that was her reason. Meng Liang is useless, but it's worth it to use his life to buy people's hearts. Jiang Pengji smiled. The corners of her eyes turned up as she smiled, which made her look more cunning. Lu Shi sat where he was in silence. Buy people's hearts? For that county military officer? Huh. It was a good deal. But Dongqing hadn't been destroyed yet. Was it a good idea for his daughter to cause trouble so early? Lu Shi had misunderstood. Was Jiang Pengji the kind of person who wanted to see the world in chaos and cause trouble everywhere? She admired the county captain. He was a courageous man. Coincidentally, Meng Liang was in her hands. Coincidentally, the troop that she was training was lacking a courageous leader. So, why not have the best of both worlds? Save the county captain, get rid of Meng Liang, and find an alpha wolf for the troop? As the saying goes, a good leader can change the atmosphere of an army. The county military officer had led troops in Tsang Prefecture's Meng County. Even though she didn't know how capable he was, he could betray his former master, set fire to the governor's manor, and escape unscathed. TSK, if the Mengs didn't value him, she would put him in an important position. Together with Su Ku, one was in charge of external affairs, and the other was in charge of internal affairs. It was a perfect match. As for whether or not the other party was willing to submit, it was not a problem for him to go from a county military officer to a small leader of a small troop. Chapter 126. The system said, "So you plan to use Meng Liang's life in exchange for his loyalty?" Have you asked for Meng Liang's opinion before doing so? Jiang Pengji snorted and asked the system, do I need to ask for the opinion of a prisoner who has been deprived of all his rights? The system said, you want to go to heaven? Jiang Pengji laughed and rolled her eyes. I've never come down from heaven. The system was speechless. Could she be any more shameless than that? The system was not the only one who thought that Jiang Pengji wanted to go to heaven. Even Lu Shi felt the same way. At a time like this, shouldn't a normal person be thinking about how to get rid of the hot potato that was Meng Liang? Or should they be preparing to protect themselves so that they wouldn't get revenge because of Meng Liang? But what about Jiang Pengji? Her first reaction was to use Meng Liang as a favor to win him over. Could it be that this was the main reason why she could become the Taizu of the Jiang dynasty in the future, and why all her opponents who competed with her for supremacy were either killed or imprisoned forever, and almost none of them could die of old age? To be honest, for the first time, Lu Shi felt the pressure on his shoulders. Father, you don't agree? Jiang Pengji frowned when she saw Lu Shi's silence. She recalled the conversation and felt that she had overlooked something. It's not that I'm against it. From the bottom of my heart, I support it. But... Lanting, don't you think you're being too cold? It's just a silly assumption, but if it's true, then Meng Liang is your stepmother's son. Have you thought about how sad your stepmother will be when you say you want to kill Meng Liang with your own hands? Lu Shi wanted to be tactful, but the words that came out of his mouth were too direct. Your mother treats you well. Can you bear to kill her son in return? Jiang Pengji looked down. Lu Shi's question was indeed something she had overlooked. Or rather, she had never cared about it. In ancient times, people were particular about bloodlines, but Jiang Pengji had never had such an impression. She was an orphan from the Federal War. Her parents' dates of birth and death were unknown. She had no memory of them at all. It was not that she did not remember them, but her memory had been erased. This was something that almost every genetic warrior would experience. Genetic warriors were a combat force secretly nurtured by the Federation. They were born for the sake of victory. As long as they were absolutely loyal, the rest of their memories would only be a burden. Before being nurtured, those memories were not allowed to exist. This was also to screen out the possible existence of spies. However, Jiang Pengji was probably an anomaly because her memory had not been completely erased. She vaguely remembered some old things. Of course, those past events were not pleasant memories for a 3-year-old child. I have indeed neglected this point. However, even if I have misgivings, so what? Out of respect for my mother, I'll turn a blind eye to it. Allow a disgusting insect to strut around in front of me, and then continue to do dirty things to the women in the residence? In my opinion, this kind of conflict is meaningless. If mother blames me for Meng Liang's death... Jiang Pengji paused and smiled. Father, you've reminded me. If Meng Liang is to die, he should die by someone else's hand. Lu Shi was speechless. What she said seemed to make sense. Regardless of whether she was conflicted or not, the result would be Meng Liang's death. So, why was she conflicted? She expressed her struggle through her rich and painful inner thoughts. She expressed that she cared about the second lady's feelings, and then she continued to do what she had to do after the pain. Meng Liang still had to die. From Jiang Pengji's point of view, it was no different from taking off one's pants and farting. After a long time, Lu Shi let out a long sigh. If your mother heard this, I don't know how heartbroken she would be. Yes, she would be heartbroken, not sad. Jiang Pengji did not know that the mother Lu Shi was talking about was not the second lady, but Gu Min had once told Lu Shi that, according to historical research, the Emperor Chen of the Jiang dynasty had a very serious emotional disorder. It was a very serious mental illness, so serious that it caused political turmoil. In other words, his daughter had already started to get sick, but it was not as serious as it seemed. Thinking about this, Lu Shi's other emotions gave way to the heartache in his heart. He was secretly glad that it was better to find out sooner than later. The sooner he could see the doctor and take the medicine, the sooner he could recover. He raised his hand and stroked Jiang Pengji's hair. "It's okay. Let the doctor come and take a look. You can't hide your illness for fear of treatment." What kind of illness was mental illness? Lu Shi did not understand because he was not a doctor. That kind of problem should be solved by professionals. Jiang Pengji was speechless. She had thought that it would create a rift between her and Lu Shi, or that he would be wary of her, but things did not go according to plan. Lu Shi reminded her, "Meng Liang is indeed a fake, but your mother does have a son. He is Meng Liang's brother, Meng Heng. If you meet him in the future, don't fight and get along with him. He is a talented person." Was he hinting for her to poach him? Jiang Pengji thought expressionlessly, if Meng Liang is not my mother's son, why would he do that? Even if he was a fake, he should be pretending to be Meng Heng, not Meng Liang. It's a long story. The grudges of the previous generation are all about the private affairs in the backyard. Lu Shi looked worried when he mentioned it, but he did not hide it from Jiang Pengji. "You are not young anymore. It's good to hear about it. Otherwise, you will be deceived in the future." Jiang Pengji was speechless. "Wait a minute, there seems to be something wrong with these words." Lu Shi continued. He changed the way he addressed her to distinguish Gu Min from his second wife. "When your aunt was still a virgin, her name was Gu Zhen. Although she was a daughter of a concubine, she was very close to Gu Min. She was like a mother to Gu Min, so she was not much different from a legitimate daughter. When she was 15 years old, she was engaged to Meng Zhan of the Mengs. But most men in the world like the new and hate the old, and few are devoted. Meng Zhan. I was wrong. I didn't expect him to be a beast in human skin." Jiang Pengji listened carefully and frowned. "Is the Meng Zhan you mentioned the current chief of Meng Prefecture? The man who connived with Meng Liang, forced his men to betray him, and burned down the chief's manor? That was incredible." Lu Shi looked disgusted when he mentioned it. "Yes." Chapter 127. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. How did the second lady know that Meng Liang wasn't her son? It was simple. She tried her best to give birth to the child. She heard people say that the cinnabar mole between her husband's eyebrows was beautiful and that he was blessed. But when she woke up, she found that her son didn't have a cinnabar mole between his eyebrows. He was born weak and small. 2 days later, she heard that Meng Zhan's concubine had given birth to a child who died prematurely. Because the child died prematurely, it was buried hastily. Also, the child had a mole between his eyebrows. The second lady was suspicious. She tried to ask Meng Zhan about it to see his reaction. However, the relationship between them had been broken for a long time. Meng Zhan always yelled at her and humiliated her. He didn't care about her dignity as the matriarch of the family. He helped his concubines torture her. The second lady's body quickly deteriorated due to the oppressive life and the lack of care after the birth. But this violent life was just the beginning. Meng Zhan believed that the second son she gave birth to was the son of adultery. He hated her to the core. How could he let her stay in his yard so comfortably? But if he killed her, he thought it would be too easy on her. 5 or 6 years of torture was enough to turn a beautiful lady into a woman with sunken eyes. She was as skinny as a stick. She looked like neither a human nor a ghost. Meng Zhan didn't want to kill her. But it was better to stab her than to torture her with a blunt knife. In the first 2 years, Meng Zhan and your aunt had a good relationship. There were some conflicts, but nothing serious. I went to Meng County with Gu Min to visit your aunt a few times. Not long after, your eldest brother passed away. Gu Min's health was getting worse. The two families had less contact. It was my fault for trusting Meng Zhan too much. I didn't realize that the things we used to communicate with each other were not prepared by your aunt. Gu Min's body got better after she gave birth to twins. When she started to manage the account books again, she realized that there was something wrong with the communication between the Lus and Meng Zhans. Gu Min, who was always smart, noticed something was wrong. She tried to send invitations to the Mengs a few times. Of course, none of the invitations reached Gu Zhen. They were like stones in the ocean. The Mengs of Cangzhou are so powerful. No matter if I visited your residence or sent an invitation, I was unable to see your aunt. At that time, Lu Shi felt that his wife was overthinking things. He and Meng Zhan were classmates and close friends. They were also brothers-in-law. Gu Zhen was in Meng Zhan's backyard. What could possibly happen? In the end, he was slapped in the face. Gu Min couldn't find out what had happened in the backyard of the Meng's residence, but she could start from other places. Finally, after much difficulty, he managed to find the maidservant who had once served Gu Zhen. Only then did he manage to get some information from her. Meng Zhan seemed to be extremely dissatisfied with Gu Zhen occupying the position of his wife. He wanted her to abdicate. Of course, none of the women who had entered the Meng's residence could leave. Regardless of whether they lived or died, they had to belong to the Mengs. Min heard from the maid that Meng Zhan's favorite concubine had threatened to turn your aunt into a human swine. At that time, she didn't think about anything and directly went to the door to ask for your aunt. If it weren't for my vigilance, I might not have been able to escape unscathed. Jiang Pengji pursed her lips. How dare you be so arrogant? Lu Shi sneered. His eyes were full of sarcasm. That's arrogant? Gu Min had forced herself to go to the door and take away the wife of a noble family. She had even let all the children of the Mengs see Gu Zhen's grotesque appearance. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell how heartless Meng Zhan was. He had tortured the wife of a noble family to such an extent. The whole Mengs had been humiliated. Gu Min was so angry that she asked Lu Shi to write a letter of separation for Gu Zhen in a fit of rage. As for whether to persuade them to separate or not, well, Gu Min wasn't a sister who couldn't afford a divorce. What right did she have to make her sister compromise and be abused as a maidservant? Of course, with the power of the Mengs, the scandal didn't spread, but the hatred had been formed. Your aunt already knew that Meng Liang, who was the second son of the Mengs, was not her biological son. He was the son of a concubine. However, the Mengs didn't seem to know that. Meng Liang thought she didn't know either. Otherwise, why would he walk into the trap? At this point, Lu Shi suddenly showed a trace of a smile. Jiang Pengji smiled helplessly. My mother is just being naughty. How did it feel to hear the son of one's enemy call one's mother and call his own mother a lowly servant in front of one's face? It did relieve some of my anger, but more than that, it was suffocating. Lu Shi sighed. The Mengs were powerful. They wanted to take her back and punish her many times. At first, Gu Min was strong enough to protect her, but then Gu Min passed away. My position as a father became a bit awkward. One was a divorcee, and the other was a widower who had lost his wife. The latter always protected the former. As time went by, there were all kinds of ugly words. Later, due to various considerations, Lu Shi finally agreed to remarry. His wife was Gu Zhen. Even so, she has been living in fear all these years. She is sensitive and thinks too much. How can she recover? Because of her eldest son, Meng Heng, Jiang Pengji said with certainty. Lu Shi nodded. She lost her second son, but her eldest son is still in the Mengs. I thought that even though Meng Zhan is despicable, even a vicious tiger would not eat its own cubs. I didn't expect that your aunt would take it to heart, and her health became worse. The second lady's life in the Lus was not good, so her eldest son could be less tortured in the Mengs. So, that's why my mother pretended not to know the truth when she saw Mengheng. Yes. It was indeed frustrating. Lu, she sneered. She was born in the wild. The Mengs of Zhangzhou are just a joke. At the same time, the audience in the streaming room exploded. Sleeping Sanguoxiangshan, watching the whole story. Women in ancient times had a hard life. The second lady was born in a good family, but her husband's family was so powerful. They wanted to torture her, but she couldn't even fight back. Yanling Shi, how is this just being powerful? He was simply a local tyrant. He could come and go as he pleased. So what if one wife died? There were still millions of other wives waiting to marry into his family. Aya Jiaodong, it seems like the girls in our era are happier. At least they can get a divorce. Not like here, where a divorce is fatal. You might even be dragged back into the pond. It's scary. Huaxia da ji, maybe it's just an extreme case. I watched the streaming. The host was riding in a carriage, and there were young women on the road. It shows that the social mores are not that restrictive to women. There are all kinds of birds in a big forest. The Meng seem to have a high social status. It's not an exaggeration to call them local tyrants. They have power and the right to do whatever they want. Sans Hisongshu snacking, social productivity determines social status. Even if the social mores are open now, they will be closed sooner or later. It's an unchangeable historical trend. Women's status will only get lower with men's demands. Jiang Pengji was lost in thought as she read the bullet screen. Chapter 128. The internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. If she had died in battle, she would have had peace. But who would have thought that she would have a second life? Jiang Pengji had no sense of belonging to this world. Her life was forced upon her by the system without her consent. But since she was alive, she would not seek death. The federal soldiers could die however they wanted, but they could not commit suicide or lose their will to live. That was the behavior of a coward. So she chose to live well. She treated it as a retreat from the battlefield and a leisurely vacation. Which one of the vacations did not pursue a happy mood? If they did not like it, they would either completely destroy it or change it into something they liked. Why force themselves to get used to it? The world should change for me, not the other way around. Don't you think so, system? Jiang Pengji asked with a smile. The system was silent for a while, then complained, "Isn't it enough for you to go to heaven? Do you want to pierce the sky? If you have the ability to show off, come down here if you have the ability. The sky is not paper. How can it be pierced?" Jiang Pengji pretended not to know and refuted the system. She liked to see the system stomp its feet and complain. It was so cute that it could not do anything about her behavior. The system endured the pain and said, "That's enough. If I talk to you again, I will have a heart attack and go back to the furnace to be reborn." Jiang Pengji had a faint smile on her lips. She looked at the waterside pavilion in the courtyard. No one knew what she was thinking. Night fell. The hustle and bustle of the day subsided. The quiet night shrouded the land. The second lady rested in peace for a few days. She looked a little better. However, she had been sick for many years. Even with the continuous supply of good medicine, she did not know when she would be able to recover the vitality she had lost. She gritted her teeth and saw her son in name. The second lady's mood fluctuated greatly. Her eyes were full of malice. Her mood fluctuated too much. When she returned to her bedroom, she naturally became even more ill. The maid hurriedly called for a doctor. "You still don't like to drink medicine. Eat some candied plums. Lu Shi entered the room and saw her covering her mouth in disgust. He could not help but be speechless. He took the box of candied plums from the maid. The second madam took it and said in a low voice, "Brother-in-law knows me best. He knows that I don't like to drink those bitter medicines. It doesn't matter how much you know. You still have to drink. Otherwise, how can you take care of your body?" Lu Shi smiled. "Don't eat too much. You'll get sore teeth. Brother-in-law has always been someone who doesn't come to the temple for no reason. Since you suddenly came to my place today, you must have something to tell me." The second lady didn't listen to his advice. Instead, she stuffed the candied plums into her mouth one after another. Only then did she suppress the bitter taste in her mouth. "Just say it." Lu Shi couldn't help but sigh. Although they were husband and wife in name, they did not have a physical relationship. Rather than husband and wife, they were more like brother and sister. Every time he saw the second madam, he would suddenly think that she was still the naive and clingy girl who liked to pester Amin. However, it was different now. Lu Shi, who had always been calm and steady, couldn't help but feel his hands itch when he thought of the culprit who had caused her to become like this. The Meng family is in trouble. Meng Zhan's county governor's office was burned and Meng County is filled with rioters. The Meng family's army is afraid that the news will be leaked. Instead of appeasing the people, they tried to suppress them with blood. This is making the people even more angry. If you want to step on them, this is the perfect opportunity. The second madam was stunned when she heard the news. Then, she burst into laughter. Tears of laughter rolled down her cheeks. "I was wondering. I thought the family couldn't bear to see me living a good life and purposely came to humiliate me. I didn't expect it to be like this." The second madam laughed so hard that tears were rolling down her cheeks. Lu Shi's heart ached when he saw her. All sorts of feelings welled up in his heart. He didn't feel good at all. "Brother-in-law, didn't you say that you'd rather tear down a temple than ruin a marriage?" Lu Shi shook his head. "You hold a grudge. When did you say that?" "Before Amin left, the person she let down the most was you. I also owed you a lot. You are my wife's sister and my wife in name. If I don't protect you, am I supposed to protect Meng Zhan? He married her, but he couldn't fulfill his obligations. He made her live like a widow. That was his fault. Lu Shi would always remember his mistakes." The second madam lowered her head with a smile. "Brother-in-law, you make me feel ashamed. If you hadn't taken me in, I wouldn't have become the madam of the Lu family. If we're talking about owing something, it's naturally me who owes you and brother-in-law. After all, this position belongs to my sister." Even if Lu Shi hadn't taken her in, no one would have dared to say anything. Lu Shi didn't owe her anything. Marrying her had caused Lu Shi a lot of trouble for no reason. His wife had died and he had married his wife's sister. She had been divorced and her reputation had been ruined. People who didn't know the truth wouldn't think too much. The Meng family had slandered her and accused her of having an affair with Lu Shi. She didn't even dare to think about those days. Lu Shi smiled bitterly. Was he really not responsible? Meng Zhan was his classmate and good friend. He was also a descendant of a loyal family. His ancestor was famous. He was the Xia dynasty's god of war, Meng Jing. Compared to the other candidates, Lu Shi naturally favored his classmate more. He was confident that he understood Meng Zhan and felt that he would be a good man. However, the result was a slap in the face. If he hadn't been blind to pick on Amin's brother-in-law, there wouldn't have been so much trouble. The second madam seemed to understand Lu Shi's thoughts. She sighed and said, "If not for sister's pity, I would have been tortured to death by those servants long ago. Although I have a biological father, it is better than not having one. My deceased mother's status is low. Who in the Gu residence cares about me? Only sister is kind and benevolent. Gu Min was only a few years older than her, but she always felt like her sister had raised her. If not for sister saving me from the well back then, would there be the Gu Zhen of today? The first madam did not care about Gu Zhen's marriage. It was her married sister who helped her pick a good husband in private. She screened those talented and virtuous men carefully. They were all good husband candidates. However, Gu Zhen was blind and chose the worst one. If she had not been stubborn and rebellious back then and had married the man her sister had painstakingly picked, her life now would be so comfortable that those noble ladies would die of envy. However, her life now was pretty good. The second madam looked down and curled her lips up slightly. She would be content with what she had. She would take good care of her sister's only child in this world. She would enjoy the blessings that her sister could not. Now, she could recuperate in peace. The real good days were yet to come. As for Meng Zhan, it was as her sister said. Take revenge if you have a grudge, and take revenge if you have a grudge. Humans only live for a few decades. If you can be stubborn, why let yourself be sullen? Every dog has its day. There will be a day when Meng Zhan will kneel at my feet like a stray dog, as lowly as an ant. Chapter 129. The humiliation she had suffered in the backyard of the Meng family, the nightmares she had endured, and the pain of losing her son would all be repaid by the culprit 1,000 times over. Not only that, but he also had to avenge his sister. She knew her sister very well, and her brother-in-law treated her very well, unlike her who was tortured in the Meng residence. How could she have a shorter life than her? Lu, she sighed softly. He had no temper with his deceased wife's stepsister. You don't have to mess with Meng Zhan because of me. It's not that I don't work hard, but I don't want you to dirty your hands for someone like that. The second lady's eyes flashed with anger. What does he have to make you worry about him? But if we miss this opportunity, I'm afraid that given the resources of the Meng clan, it will be difficult to shake them. The second lady snorted coldly and glanced at Lu Shi. Brother-in-law has always been ruthless. Why are you pretending to be ignorant now? Lu Shi was speechless. Could he say, black-hearted and vicious, was not a good word? They really were sisters. Praising someone was like scolding someone. Opportunities don't come often, but it's not like there won't be a next time. When killing an enemy, the most taboo was not to kill with one strike. If my brother-in-law trampled on the Mengs this time, it wouldn't hurt at all. Instead, it would incite their hatred and bring trouble to our doorstep. Brother-in-law has been operating in Hu County for many years and it is not easy to get such a good position. If we lose it because of this, it will not be worth it. If I'm going to fight, I naturally have to kill him in one strike. The second madam smiled coldly. She had endured those years of living a life worse than death. She could afford to wait a few more years. Lu Shi stared at her for a long time and heaved a sigh of relief. It's great that you can think that way. The second madam glanced at him and said angrily, does brother-in-law think that one, is an ignorant girl? I'm just worried that you'll take things too hard, Lu Shi muttered. Although she had married the man in front of her and given her a place of protection, she was stubborn and opinionated. She knew that the Meng family would not let it go so easily. In order to prevent the Meng family from implicating her further, she refused to cooperate with them. She did not take the medical officer's advice to heart. She was delaying her illness, torturing herself, and refusing to receive proper treatment. How could Lu Shi's heart bear it? Now that Gu Zhen was willing to let go, he felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his heart. If she continued to be stubborn, as her brother-in-law, there was nothing he could do. It's good that you've thought it through. Recuperate well. As long as you get better soon, I'll provide you with delicacies every day. Of course. When have I ever been polite to brother-in-law? The second madam snorted and asked, "Let's not talk about this first. Have you thought about how to deal with Meng Liang? How dare he openly claim the title of my son? Is he worthy of that with his background?" Lu Shi thought about it carefully. Jiang Pengji's words appeared in his mind, and he revealed a little. Every wrong has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. Why are you dragging an innocent child into this? Lu Shi's first sentence made the second madam's face darken, but the second half of his sentence lightened up. Moreover, your brother-in-law is the chief of a county. I can't do anything to a child. The second madam was smart, or else Meng Zhan would not have fallen in love with her at first sight. The Mengs were a prestigious family in Dongqing, and Meng Zhan's wife was at least the daughter of an aristocratic family. Even though the second madam was later recognized as the daughter of the first wife, her status was still much lower. Lu Shi's words were vague, but as smart as she was, she immediately understood what he was hinting at. With Lu Shi's current status, it was indeed embarrassing for him to make a move on a junior, but it shouldn't be a problem for his children, right? However, the Mengs were still deeply rooted in Dongqing, and they could not be easily shaken. If he wanted to do anything to Meng Liang, he could not drag the Lus into it, lest the furious Mengs pursue the matter. It was not worth alerting the enemy now. In a few words, Meng Liang's situation had become extremely dangerous, but Lu Shi did not have the slightest premonition of impending danger. Just like what mother said, the Lus are a pile of mud that can't be helped. Look, I can see the fire in Lu Zhongqing's eyes, but he has to suppress his anger. He doesn't dare to touch me. He is such a coward, but father still thinks he is powerful and fears him everywhere. The girl, who was originally beautiful and charming, was lying on the comfortable bed. She tilted her head and saw the neatly arranged clothes on the side. She casually picked them up with her fingers and snorted in disgust, as if she was holding something dirty in her hand. This is so shabby. This kind of lousy material is only worn by the servants in the manor. Lu Zhongqing actually sent it here to humiliate me. She followed Meng Liang into the manor, and the manservant who was pretending to be a maid hurried forward to stop Meng Liang from throwing the clothes out. She kept muttering, "My Lang Jun, you are wandering outside, so of course you are not as good as in the manor." Although this kind of material is shabby, it only became popular 3 years ago in Shangjing. Hejian is a poor and remote place. I heard that some gentry families can't even keep their basic decency. It's already good enough to have clothes to cover their bodies. Lang Jun, just bear with it for a while. When the matter blows over, master and madam will come to take you back. Meng Liang secretly gritted his teeth in anger, but he had to admit that what the manservant said made sense. It was not the time to be picky. If it weren't for Meng Hun, I wouldn't have to suffer like this. Hearing what the manservant said, Meng Liang suddenly became angry. He is just a lowly servant of the Mengs. How dare he throw a tantrum and make father so angry? The manservant echoed, "That's right. Meng Hun is just like his name. He is a stupid person. Lang Jun, you don't have to be angry with him. When the Meng's army kills all the rebels, Meng Hun will fall into your hands." Meng Hun was the powerful man who burned down the county governor's mansion. He used to be a servant of the Mengs and had climbed to the position of the county governor with great effort. If it were in the early days of the Xia dynasty, Meng Hun wouldn't dare to say anything even if all the women in his family came to serve him, let alone his wife. But now, he really thinks that the Mengs are so weak that he even dares to bully a little servant. "I'm so angry." The manservant's words did make Meng Liang's anger dissipate, but he still felt an unspeakable humiliation. Yesterday, he and the manservant had sneaked out and accidentally saw Meng Hun sneaking into Hejian County. They were almost scared out of their wits. If he had known that Meng Hun would be so persistent, he wouldn't have been so willful. He wouldn't have ditched his guards and followed his friends here. Damn it! Thinking of the little girl he should have gotten earlier, and then thinking of the current situation, he couldn't help but feel pain in his chest. But the manservant also reminded him that they should hide in Lu Shi's mansion for the time being. They would contact the guards and servants when they settled down. When there was someone protecting him, Meng Liang was naturally not afraid of Meng Hun. Meng Hun could be killed by a random knife. Chapter 130. Young master, don't be angry. It's not worth it to harm your health. At that time, Madam will be distressed, and I will also feel uncomfortable. Meng Liang's temperament was eccentric and his methods were insidious. Countless servants and maids had been killed by him. Only the one by his side was perceptive. Her ability to take advantage of the situation and flatter others were far inferior to her. Ever since she started serving Meng Liang, she was still alive and well. Meng Liang's mood became much better after being flattered by the manservant. When they arrived at the Lu mansion, Meng Liang didn't feel threatened by Meng Hun's attention. Meng Liang's heart started to feel restless again. Ever since he had sex at the age of 11, he couldn't leave a woman for even a day. Now that his life was no longer in danger, he naturally had to think about those things that made him happy. He couldn't help but think about the graceful figure of the young lady from before. Unfortunately, he had just thought of a way to sneak in and hadn't had time to implement it. The manservant had a thorough understanding of Meng Liang. To put it bluntly, when Meng Liang moved his butt, the manservant could tell what kind of *T he was going to take. The manservant rolled his eyes and suggested, Lang Jun, I heard that Lu Zhongqing was a rare handsome man in Hejian County when he was young. His wives and concubines were all beautiful. Let's not talk about anything else. Isn't Madame Gu Zhen also a charming beauty? The fact that Meng Liang was not Gu Zhen's biological son was known to everyone who had served him before. Meng Liang hated his eldest brother the most because he was talented and virtuous. All the elders of the Meng clan liked him very much and even decided to make him the successor of the clan. But what about him? Even though he was also the second son of the first wife, his actions were too absurd, and he accomplished nothing in his studies and writing. That was why Meng Liang liked to insult Meng Hun every time he got drunk. The secrets he revealed included the mystery of his birth. Because of this, it was unknown how many groups of maids and manservants had been secretly disposed of. He was the only one who Meng Liang liked and spared his life. Meng Liang's eyes widened. The servant's suggestion had opened the door to a whole new world for him. However, even though Gu Zhen was not his biological mother, she was his biological mother in name. Moreover, she was his father's first wife. The manservant saw that he was obviously moved, but still pretended to be reserved, so he directly pushed him. Lang Jun is not related to that madam by blood. Moreover, I heard that Lu Zhongqing did not bring any concubines with him when he took office in Hu County. That madam has been alone for many years, how could she endure loneliness? Meng Liang was very tempted, and the servant took the opportunity to add more firewood. As for the fact that Madam is Master's legal wife, she has already remarried Lu Zhongqing. What does that have to do with the Meng family? She wasn't buried in the Meng family's ancestral grave after her death, and her name isn't recorded in the family tree either. She's no longer Master's wife, and she's not related to you by blood. This. Meng Liang was completely convinced. When he thought of the fact that Gu Zhen was once his father's wife, he felt an inexplicable excitement in his heart. The manservant continued, if Lang Jun is afraid of that lady's identity, I heard that Lu Zhongqing has a few beautiful concubines. Wouldn't they be able to please Lang Jun? If that doesn't work, doesn't Lu Zhongqing still have a daughter? Even though she's just a concubine's daughter and doesn't deserve you. Meng Liang raised his hand to stop the manservant and scolded him with a smile, you sly fellow, you know me best. The manservant lowered his head and smiled as he accepted Meng Liang's compliment. He secretly wiped the sweat off his forehead. Although it would be unfair to Lu Shi to shift the blame to Meng Liang, if Meng Liang's Lang Jun was still thinking about the young lady and left the Lu residence without a second thought, his life would be forfeit if he was unlucky enough to meet Meng Hun. His family was still making a living in Meng County. If Meng Liang died because of his carelessness, his family would not be able to survive either. He didn't want to be the accomplice of a villain, but he had to look out for himself. Only by serving Meng Liang well could he and his family live a decent life. He could only hope that those stupid guards would find his Lang Jun quickly and leave the Lu residence. Only then would they be able to commit less sin. If they were unlucky, Meng Liang would ruin all the women in Lu Shi's backyard, and he would be at his wit's end. With that thought in mind, the manservant helped Meng Liang change his clothes and prepared to hand them over to the maidservants in the residence to wash them. "You! Come here." After searching for a long time, the manservant finally found a maidservant who was cleaning with a broom. When the maidservant heard the manservant call out to her in a rough voice, she was so scared that her head shrank. She stepped forward timidly and bowed. The manservant stuffed the clothes into the maidservant's arms and ordered her around. "Go and wash Lungjuan's clothes and bring them back clean tomorrow." If they were still in the Meng residence, Meng Liang's clothes would be thrown away after wearing them once. Why would they be washed and worn a second time? But the manservant knew that the Lu residence was not like the Meng residence. They didn't have that many ready-made clothes for Meng Liang to change into. The maidservant lowered her head and took the bag of clothes. Her whole body was trembling, as if she was frightened by the manservant's overbearing aura. Seeing that the maidservant was so afraid of him, the manservant felt proud. It was as if he had regained the prestige of the Meng residence, but he still had to belittle her. A small place is a small place. Even the servants are so cowardly. Just a little louder and they're scared like quails. The maidservant left Meng Liang's courtyard with the clothes. When she passed by the garden, she was so angry that she threw the clothes to the ground and stepped on them to vent her anger. But when she thought of the conversation she had just heard, her heart trembled. Her eyes fell on Jiang Pengji's courtyard. The maidservant secretly bit her lip and squatted down to pick up the clothes. She changed her direction and didn't want to go to the laundry room. At that time, the key to Jiang Pengji's courtyard had already been locked. The maidservant could only ask the gatekeeper in a low voice. "I have something important to tell Lang Jun in detail. Sister, please do me a favor and help me pass the message. I think Lang Jun is already asleep at this time. If it's not urgent, we can talk about it tomorrow." The maidservant shook her head. She was holding back the words in her heart. Her body was still weak and frightened. She had been transferred from the kitchen to the guest's courtyard as a maidservant. It was supposed to be a very leisurely job because there were very few people in the Lu residence, let alone staying overnight. But she didn't expect that a big Buddha would come today. She didn't pay attention to her volume and was overheard by the maidservant. "This is very urgent. Please make an exception, sister." The gatekeeper sighed and said, "Then I'll help you pass the message. If you annoy Lang Jun, you'll have to bear the consequences." In fact, Jiang Pengji had already laid down to rest. Hearing the maidservant's message, she was still sleepy. She picked up her cloak and draped it over her shoulders. "Let her in." The door opened and a figure wearing a maidservant's clothes walked in. Jiang Pengji immediately recognized the person. Chapter 131. The maid was the victim who had been forced by the servants when Jiang Pengji first came to the Lu manor. But she remembered that she had already instructed the butler to move her from the kitchen, where the work was heavy, to the guest room, which was very quiet. The maidservant raised her head. The words she wanted to say were stuck in her throat. She didn't know where to start. The more he couldn't speak, the more anxious he felt. The more anxious he was, the more he couldn't control his mouth. She thought that she would see her Lang Jun angry and feel that she was playing with her, but she didn't expect her Lang Jun to look at her tenderly and comfort her with a gentle voice. Jiang Pengji looked her up and down. Don't rush. Speak slowly. The rules of the Lu residence were not strict, but everyone had their own jobs, and the range of activities was fixed. The corners of her clothes and socks were stained with relatively dry mud that was as fine as dust. There were gardeners taking care of the soil in the garden, so the soil on the ground was slightly wet. The mud was thicker and bigger, and it was also sticky. Therefore, the dust on her clothes and feet must have come from cleaning the guest room. At the moment, there were only Meng Liang and his servants in the guest room of the Lu mansion. The clothes in the maid's hands were also Meng Liang's. Her clothes were neat, and her hair was clean. There were no traces of washing, which meant that she hadn't touched her hair since she combed it in the morning. Although she looked a little panicked, she didn't look desperate or humiliated. Therefore, she probably didn't come to find him because she was bullied by Meng Liang and his servants. Then why? Jiang Pengji furrowed her brows. The only explanation was that she had accidentally overheard the master and servant talking nonsense. In the blink of an eye, she had already made up her mind and her voice became even softer. Think about it slowly. Tell me what you want to say. I'll listen here. It took the maidservant quite a while to overcome the nervousness and fear in her heart. She stuttered and roughly repeated what she had heard. Jiang Pengji's face remained expressionless as she listened, as if the servant girl's words were within her expectations. As a matter of fact, it was more or less the same. How could a dog spit out ivory? Similarly, how could a scumbag like Meng Liang say anything nice? To be able to scare this maidservant to such an extent, the content was definitely not ordinary. After listening, she nodded calmly. You can stay here tonight. The maidservant's face suddenly paled, as if she had recalled something embarrassing. Jiang Pengji knew that she had misunderstood. She could not help but add, I have my own way of dealing with the master and servant. They are not easy to deal with. If you continue to stay in the guest room to clean up, you might be at a disadvantage. I'll talk to the housekeeper tomorrow and have him transfer you to my courtyard. Your message was very timely. If I hadn't warned them in advance, I wouldn't have known that they could be this crazy. With regards to this arrangement, the servant girl naturally would not object. She even felt slightly relieved. Perhaps because she had been hurt before, she was more sensitive to the emotions of others. That pair of master and servant were not good people at all. If they continued to stay there for another day, she would tremble with fear for another day. Now that he had been transferred to second Langjuan's yard, he would be treated much better, just like a promotion. Thank you, Lang Jun. Jiang Pengji asked, what is your name? Your servant's name is Ah Zhu. The maidservant replied respectfully. Even though they were all servants, their monthly salary was different depending on which part of the Lu residence they worked in. All in all, second Langjuan's yard was the best. The monthly salary of a servant girl was more than double of what she used to get. With the monthly salary, she could still keep a few dozen copper coins for her personal savings after giving money to the family every month. Ah Zhu? Jiang Pengji thought for a while and asked, is there any special meaning to it? Who gave it to you? The maidservant shook her head and said seriously, I didn't have a name before I came to the Lu residence. The servant in the kitchen took pity on me and gave me one. If that's the case, then change it. Jiang Pengji thought for a while. She already had Takshu and Xuanmei by her side, so she should add another one. Nongqin. The maidservant was illiterate, so she did not know which word was Nongqin. But it sounded much nicer than Ah Zhu. Lang Jun had given it to her personally. Jiang Pengji was not sleepy, so she started chatting with Nongqin. Do you often do manual labor at home? I am very strong. Although her body was thin and weak, her strength was indeed greater than that of ordinary women. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to carry the red lacquered wooden stick and beat that servant until he breathed his last. However, because of her greater strength, she ate more than others. Jiang Pengji was amused by her answer. She praised her with a smile. It's a good thing to be strong. Nongqin was a little embarrassed. She had been scolded by her parents for eating too much when she was young. Her grandmother even saw her as a jinx. In the end, she listened to a broker in the neighborhood and sold her at a low price. Selling her not only earned them money, but also some monthly salary. As for how Nongqin would live in the future, her family did not care. Jiang Pengji said to Nongqin, "Do you want to learn martial arts from me?" She wanted to change the world, and she had to start with the people around her. Who said women were not as good as men? As long as they did not disappoint her. Although it was a little late to learn martial arts at that age, she wanted people who were not afraid of death and had strength. The other requirements could be put aside. Nongqin was surprised, but she still nodded solemnly. Her life was saved by Lang Jun, so it belonged to him. Yes. Jiang Pengji smiled. Very good. Nongqin did not know why her Lang Jun suddenly smiled so happily. But she was happy when he was happy. Although it was just to promote a servant girl, it was related to personnel changes in the Lus, so she had to inform the housekeeper. When she heard the news the next day, Takshu's eyes widened in surprise. Lang Jun is going to teach her martial arts? Not really. I just give her some pointers, Jiang Pengji said with a smile. She is a silly girl. Therefore, she would complete Jiang Pengji's training even if she had to risk her life. That was one of the main reasons why Jiang Pengji chose her. Takshu did not understand, but seeing her Lang Jun's cunning smile, she naturally understood that her Lang Jun admired the servant girl. Xuanmei was doing needlework at the side. She naturally glared at Takshu. She is a good girl. Why do you want her to learn martial arts and play with guns? If she plays with guns and sticks, how can she serve her in-laws when she gets married? How can she be a good wife and teach her children? Won't she blame you if she can't get married? Jiang Pengji said calmly, why should she serve her in-laws and teach her children? Xuanmei was about to explain the reason, but she suddenly remembered her Lang Jun's gender. Her heart skipped a beat. She knew she was unlucky. Chapter 132. When you belittle yourself, don't blame others for hitting you when you're down. If she could do it all over again, she would definitely say no to the system. It was too scary to be reborn in ancient times. She would rather die in battle. She didn't pay much attention to it before, but when she carefully observed the culture of the era, she discovered a shocking piece of news. Humans in this era relied on the most ancient and primitive method of reproduction, which was to make women pregnant and pregnant. Streamer v. It's horribly backward. Such a waste of human resources can be sentenced to jail in the Federation. The viewers in the streaming room realized that the streamer's style was a little off. After understanding a little, they understood what she was complaining about. Now, there's nothing wrong with a woman giving birth to a child, right? Why do I feel that the streamer has a horrifying expression as if she's opened the door to a new world? But the pregnant woman who passed by just now had a big belly. I felt tired just looking at her. Haiku Shichang, the medical conditions in ancient times were really bad. Giving birth to a child was like going through the gates of hell. They could lose their lives easily. I've read novels about internal strife in ancient times. Not only did women have to face the problem of natural dystocia, but they also had to deal with external harm. It feels like every woman in ancient times was an expert at abortion. But it should be better for ordinary families. There was a mix of viewers in the streaming room. There were people of all ages, and there were even many mothers who had given birth. When talking about the pain of giving birth and the torture of pregnancy, they had endless grievances. As they chatted, some viewers in the streaming room suddenly remembered Jiang Pengji's complaints. They were very curious about how people in the future world gave birth. Xinruo Binking, speaking of which, it seems like the streamer hasn't talked about how people in her world gave birth. Hot pot rice noodles, I wonder if test tube babies are popularized in the future world? Chunlai, test tube babies are possible, but I always feel that this kind of birth goes against nature and can easily cause social and moral problems. Because Jiang Pengji was complaining about the backward methods of childbirth in ancient times, the viewers in the streaming room boldly guessed that childbirth in the future world should be very simple, or it should be said that the burden on women was small. Otherwise, she wouldn't have complained so much. In fact, that was indeed the case. From Jiang Pengji's point of view, making women pregnant for a few months before giving birth completely went against the core human resources deployment strategy of the Federation. If anyone in her world dared to do such a thing, they would definitely be punished by the Federation and imprisoned for a few years. Host V, in my world, they definitely wouldn't use such a barbaric method of reproduction. Low efficiency, a waste of female human resources, and the quality of reproduction was also very worrying. Almost all women rejected this inhumane method of reproduction. There were frequent wars in the Federation. If they relied on such a slow method of reproduction, it was almost conceivable that most of the female resources would be used for reproduction. In that case, they would become reproduction machines instead of humans. This kind of behavior was completely prohibited by the Federation's human rights laws. No matter how dissatisfied Jiang Pengji was, she had to admit that the technology, civilization, and productivity of an era completely influenced the structure of society. Reproduction was inseparable from women, and reproduction required time and energy, which also forced women in this era to be confined to the backyard and inner courtyard, unable to create the production value that they deserved. As time passed, their social status would gradually decline. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but start bombarding the system. It's all your fault. He couldn't even let her die in peace. This was a violation of her human rights. Do you know how many people are waiting in line to be reborn? Are you still complaining about me? It was already good enough that it wasn't deeply grateful, but it was still bombarding it. Which system would be so aggrieved? You have to understand one thing. Transmigration or rebirth can't turn a pig into a human. Jiang Pengji sneered and opened up her venomous tongue. Smart and capable people can do well anywhere. There's no need for you to interfere at all. Losers will always be losers no matter where they go, unless you let them transmigrate and rebirth and conveniently give them IQ enhancement surgery. She didn't have a good life in her previous life. She was a general of the Federation, the commander of the 7th Army Corps, and held 1/10 of the authority in the Federation. Other than the commander-in-chief, no one could order her to do anything. The 7th Army Corps was ranked in the top 3 in terms of overall strength. Her life was written with inspiration and success. She ended at the peak of her life, but death could elevate people again. She didn't doubt what kind of position she would have in the history books. But the system inexplicably interfered. There was a huge gap between her previous life and this one. She wanted to strangle this damn thing to death. You're the unnecessary and hindrance. Jiang Pengji coldly concluded, causing tens of millions of points of damage to the system's soul. The system wanted to curl up into a ball. It was the first time it was so despised by its host. She even bombarded it for being a hindrance. In order to not be despised anymore, it felt that it needed to level up so that it wouldn't continue to be looked down upon. Host, if you continue to act like this, I'm really going to throw a tantrum. The system bombarded her ears, and its grievances could be heard through the electronic voice. I wanted to wait for 2 more days, but now I've decided to level up immediately. Level up? She had just fused a bit of force to level up her streamer's level, and now the system was about to level up and evolve? What a coincidence, hee hee. The system said, children will grow from babies to adults. As the host, in order to keep up with the host's pace of growth and to better complete missions, the system has to level up again and again. After all, every host was different. Whether it was the host's identity, origin, gender, personality, or even habits, they were all unique. As an inflexible intelligence, the system naturally couldn't treat all the hosts the same way. In order to increase the tacit understanding between the host and improve the host's service enjoyment, the system had to level up and keep up with the times. Not to mention that Jiang Pengji had already despised it to such a state. If it didn't level up and let her see its powerful abilities, it wouldn't be able to live on. It would let Jiang Pengji understand how important it was. With such a powerful cheat, it could be a winner in life. It said. Of course, some functions will be unlocked and some settings will be changed according to the host's conditions. In addition, for the system to operate normally without errors, it needs to be checked and upgraded regularly. It's also necessary to download patches. Jiang Pengji nodded secretly. I see. You really should level up and get some patches. Not to mention other things, its inflexible personality and way of doing things were indeed a little contradictory to her. Right, how long will it take for you to level up? For the first level up, there isn't much to download and install, and the time taken is also short. It will take about 12 hours. In order not to affect the host's daily streaming, the system will choose to automatically level up when the host turns off the streaming. She raised her eyebrows. I can only have 12 hours of peace. System. Get lost. Chapter 133. Even though it was just a polite greeting, Jiang Pengji had said that she would visit Wei Yuan's house the next day to apologize. However, Wei Yuan still held a grudge against her, but he couldn't make it too obvious. As a result, Wei Yuan's expression remained cold and stiff. Even though he tried his best to soften his attitude and make himself appear less stiff, it was the opposite of what he wanted. Jiang Pengji took in all of his emotions. Is your cold getting better? Jiang Pengji asked with concern. You look a little pale. I'm fine. I've already taken some medicine. I'll be fully recovered in 2 days. Wei Yuan stroked his beard awkwardly. He didn't have a cold, he just got sick from anger. Wei Yuan had his own interpretation of Jiang Pengji's visit that day because he had a different way of thinking. In order to invite Wei Yuan to be a teacher and teach Lu Shi one-on-one, the Lu residents had paid a generous sum of money. Not only did he pay for his studies, but he also received a considerable sum of money every month. During festivals, he would even give generous gifts and show concern for his well-being every few days. In the whole of Hejian County, the Lus had been giving him the best treatment. However, Wei Yuan had been taking a few days off recently. Even though there was a reason for it, something had happened in his family, it was a fact that his studies had been delayed. Wei Yuan felt that the student's visit was probably to urge him to go back to class as soon as possible. Wei Yuan felt an indescribable discomfort when he thought about it. He felt a little embarrassed. The student in front of him had seen his scandal. Even though they both had a tacit understanding and didn't bring it up, Wei Yuan was not easily fooled. How could he not know that Jiang Pengji already knew about it? Under such circumstances, he felt uncomfortable teaching the student again. He had to face the student's face every day. If it was in the past, Lu Shi would have scolded him in a righteous and confident manner. But now? He tried to imagine the situation in his mind, and a scene appeared in his mind. It made him even more uncomfortable. He simply could not tolerate that kind of situation. On one hand, the student seemed to be bowing respectfully to him, but in reality, there was no sincerity in it. On the other hand, the student was staring at him with a pair of eyes that seemed to see through everything. That feeling. It was as if all the clothes on his body had been stripped off and thrown in public. Wei Yuan knew that he was overthinking things, but he couldn't control his imagination. This student knew about the shameful scandal that he had tried so hard to bury. This made him, as a teacher, unable to straighten his back. They weren't even in school yet, but he already felt a sense of embarrassment and stage fright. Thinking of this, Wei Yuan's mood became even more complicated. Jiang Pengji acted as if she didn't see Wei Yuan's expression. She pushed the gifts that she had prepared beside her forward and said, "Master has been feeling unwell recently, but I haven't been able to visit you personally. I have let you down. If you don't mind, please accept this student's gift." Wei Yuan didn't want to accept it, but he seemed to think of something and changed his mind. He had the maidservant accept the gift. "From what you said yesterday, is Zhongqing back?" Jiang Pengji nodded. "My father has been back from Hu County for more than half a month, but he's still resting at home due to the long journey. He hasn't gone out to make friends or visit anyone. My father has always admired your talent and knowledge. If you wish to visit, I can pass on your message." Wei Yuan shook his head. The Lu Shi at that moment was the same as before. There was no trace of the intimidating aura from before. "Since Zhongqing is still resting, I won't disturb him." Wei Yuan chuckled and teased, "As for your words of admiration, there's quite a bit of falsehood in them. Who doesn't know that Lu Zhongqing is famous for being knowledgeable in Hejian County? You're being modest. My father and you specialize in different fields. How can we compare? My father is the governor of Hu County, and he works for the people. You, on the other hand, live in seclusion at home and concentrate on your studies. When it comes to being an official, of course you can't compare to my father. But when it comes to learning, I'm afraid my father can't compare to you." Jiang Pengji answered with a smile. It seemed like she was telling the truth, but there was a hint of praise in her voice. Although Wei Yuan didn't want to admit it, he had to admit that his dull student had become more talkative after going through the ordeal. If it was in the past, he would have told the truth and offended him, which would have made him unhappy. Although Wei Yuan was an old-fashioned and strict scholar, deep down, he still liked to listen to flattery. But even though it was pleasing to hear, he couldn't continue with the speech he had prepared after Jiang Pengji's tactful reply. Originally, he had wanted to temporarily resign from his position as the teacher of the Lu Manor because of his illness and lack of energy. He wanted Lu Shi to teach him personally for a few months. He had even thought of a reason. Lu Shi and his beloved son had been separated for so many years. The father and son needed time and space to communicate. But now, if he continued to say that, it would seem like he was being unreasonable and purposely wanted to give up on his student. Wei Yuan felt a little conflicted. Jiang Pengji looked at him coldly. The audience in the streaming room was getting impatient. What was so interesting about watching two ancient people exchange pleasantries? Xinrua Bingqing, this is so depressing. When can you stop looking at him? Although Wei Yuan's looks were decent for his uncle's generation, he wasn't a peerlessly handsome uncle. He couldn't even lick the screen. Jiang Pengji laughed at the complaints of the readers. Host V, are you bored? Why do I feel like Mr. Wei Yuan's psychological activities are super interesting? Countless ellipses appeared in the streaming room. Everyone, host, we're not well educated. Don't make fun of us. Their eyes were sore from staring, but they still couldn't see any changes in Wei Yuan's expression, let alone analyze his thoughts. Between a teacher and a student, the most important thing was to test them. Wei Yuan was no exception. He knew Lu Shi's progress in his studies and his talent in this area. His questions were simple and easy to understand. After a long time, Wei Yuan stroked his beard and sighed. Very good. You haven't fallen behind in your studies. You've taught me well. Wei Yuan smiled bitterly and shook his head. It should be your father who taught you well. He wasn't being polite. He was speaking the truth. In the past, no matter how much he tried to teach him, Lu Shi was like a block of wood. He wouldn't ask what he didn't understand, and when he understood, he wouldn't say anything. He would keep everything bottled up in his stomach. Wei Yuan could only watch anxiously from the sidelines, but the child still looked confused. Chapter 134. He had changed a lot. Not only was he graceful, but his expression was also confident and proud. That was his spirit, not anything else. Wei Yuan was confused. How could he have changed so much in such a short time? But when he thought about what Feng Jin had said the day before, he let go of his doubts. There was a saying that one would be reborn when placed in a hopeless situation. It could be seen that after a great disaster, even a person with poor aptitude would be reborn and make great progress. Not to mention the personal guidance of Lu Shi, a gifted scholar from Hejian County, the effect was even better. Of course, Wei Yuan would never have guessed that the student in front of him was a completely different person. Zhongqing always said that everyone has their own strengths and that a teacher should be observant, focusing on the student's aptitude and interest, making up for the student's weaknesses and strengths. Now, it seems that I am not as insightful as your father. Wei Yuan said sincerely. There was a tinge of shame on his old face. There was not the slightest bit of hypocrisy. He was sincere. Jiang Pengji's attitude of watching from the sidelines changed. She now had a different view of Wei Yuan. She knew that if it were not for Lu Shi's memory and the books she had memorized, she would not have been able to pass Wei Yuan's test so easily. Lu Shi's grades had something to do with Wei Yuan, but it was not that important. He had wronged Lu Shi by taking responsibility for Lu Shi's studies. Qiguan Rang sat quietly on the side, watching the conversation between the two. To be exact, he was watching Jiang Pengji. He thought that the young man was very interesting. He was not a good person, but he had to show his most harmless side. Interesting. How interesting. After Jiang Pengji left, Wei Yuan still had a troubled look on his face. Qiguan Rang sat to the side, sipping his tea. After watching his future father-in-law's drama, he finally spoke. Master Gongqiao, are you worried about Lu Lanting? Wei Yuan trusted Qiguan Rang, but there was a hint of desperation in that trust. After all, they were going to be father and son-in-law in the future. Of course. If I continue to teach her, I'm afraid I'll mislead her. If I don't do anything, it'll be embarrassing. The last few words were practically mumbled by Wei Yuan. Qiguan Rang smiled. What's so difficult about that? I'll just resign and let Lu Lanting find another teacher. Wei Yuan shook his head in denial. That won't do. The Lu residence has always treated me well. Wouldn't that make me look like a villain? Qiguan Rang's brain spun and thought of another idea. He secretly sneered in his heart. Perhaps his idea was exactly what someone wanted. If that's the case. He thought for a moment and suggested, Mr. Gongqiao has friends all over the world. Don't tell me you don't have a suitable teacher for Lu Lanting. All you have to do is to decline the offer and sincerely explain your reasons. You can't bear to delay Lu Lanting's studies and recommend a teacher who is suitable for her. When the time comes, the Lus will not misunderstand you and may even praise you for your generosity. Wei Yuan considered Qiguan Rang's suggestion seriously. A name flashed through his mind, and he was tempted. That's a good idea. That candidate is indeed suitable for Lanting. Wei Yuan hesitated. That won't do. Although that person is suitable, he has a strange temperament. Based on Lanting's personality, she will be at a disadvantage if she becomes his student. Qiguan Rang was curious. What kind of person could make Mr. Wei Yuan so tempted and yet so hesitant? Who is Mr. Gongcao's candidate? Wei Yuan casually replied, Langya Yuanjing is the most suitable. In layman's terms, Wei Yuan was a famous teacher in the education world. If he recommended someone to the Lus, then the candidate must be of a higher level than him. Otherwise, he would be suspected of shifting the blame. However, the candidate must be of a higher level, suitable for Lu Lanting's temperament, and virtuous. No matter how he thought about it, there was only one candidate. Langya Yuanjing? Qiguan Rang murmured in surprise. As mentioned before, in Dongqing, Qiguan Rang respected two extraordinary people. One was Lu Shi from Hejian, and the other was Langya Yuanjing. As for the former, he was from a poor family and was of mixed blood. He had no connections to visit them, and he probably could not even enter their houses. The latter was famous all over the world. He taught students all over the 5 countries, and everyone in the world admired and respected him. To put it bluntly, Mr. Yuanjing was the leader of the education world. It was said that some students would burn incense and pray to Mr. Yuanjing's longevity tablet before their assessment, hoping that he would bless them during their high school. Yes. Mr. Wei Yuan nodded and stroked his beard. Yuanjing and I are classmates, and we've been in contact in recent years. Thinking about it, if I write down the ins and outs of the matter, Yuanjing will consider me and accept Lanting. Even if I can't become his student, I can still study in Langya Academy. There are many knowledgeable scholars there, and it'll be better than studying alone. Mr. Wei Yuan felt much better when he thought about it. Qiguan Rang smiled bitterly. If it's Mr. Yuanjing from Langya, the Lus will be very satisfied. Mr. Wei Yuan snorted. Throughout Dongqing and the 5 countries, no one is better than Yuanjing. It was said that people of the same trade were enemies. However, if the other party was Yuanjing, he was convinced. Not to mention anything else, just the fact that Yuanjing went to the northern borderline a few years ago and fought for the 3 cities made him inferior to Yuanjing. On the other hand, Jiang Pengji seemed to have expected it. Her mood remained cheerful. The viewers in the live stream also noticed this. In the words of the system, they were laughing like a sly fox that had gotten its way. Canghai Yishengxiu, every time I see the host smile so brightly, I feel like something bad is going to happen. Hongjun Laozu Jihua, who said nothing good is going to happen. To be more precise, it's the host who is lucky. At least, since she started following the updates of the streaming room, she had never seen anyone make Jiang Pengji suffer a loss. At most, it would be her giving in once or twice. Jiang Pengji got off the carriage, and a magpie flew over from the sky. She smiled and sighed. There's a magpie. It seems like something good is coming. Lanky Yubuz, every time I see the host pretending to be mysterious, I feel a pain in the ass. The audience in the streaming room did not know why she was happy, and she was determined not to explain. Wasn't it a pain in the ass? Jiang Pengji said with certainty, don't worry. We'll know in 2 days. She did not have high expectations about going to Langya to study, but since she was determined to do something big, she had to be prepared. Chapter 135. The Lus had to take the initiative to fire Mr. Wei Yuan, even if he had the intention to resign. Doing so would attract hatred. The best way was for Mr. Wei Yuan to resign and write a letter of recommendation for her. It didn't matter where he recommended her. She would go to Langyi in the end. The key was for Mr. Wei Yuan to resign. That way, both the Lus and Mr. Wei Yuan would have a way out. Jiang Pengji did not think too much before she arrived, but after carefully observing Wei Yuan's expression and speculating on his psychological changes, she felt a little more confident. The man was more understanding than she had imagined, or rather, he was a truly benevolent teacher who was willing to consider his students' future. In this era, a teacher for a day was a father for life. Many teachers knew that they weren't suitable for teaching, but they would persist for the sake of their pride. That would only lead the students astray. Even though Wei Yuan had his faults, he was a righteous man. He wouldn't make things difficult for his students. Lang Yi. TSK, I hope it won't disappoint me. She opened her sandalwood fan and leaned against the table. She closed her eyes and looked relaxed, but her mind was working on something. The war situation in this era was completely different from her era. There were too many differences. If they really wanted to do something big and fight for the world, they would have to compete for food, manpower, and territory. Grain was needless to say. They could always find a way to get their hands on it. Feeding off the enemy was one of the ways. Territory was easy. It was only a matter of time before Dongqing became chaotic. In the next few years, it wouldn't be too difficult to find a place. She had already picked a place. The second problem was manpower. She could make do with other things, but manpower couldn't be easily dealt with. Manpower didn't just refer to military strength. Simple troops could be solved with rice and money. Soldiers could be built, horses could be bought, and with a little training, it would be more or less presentable. But it wasn't so easy to get high-level civil and military talents. In this era, the literacy rate was too low. There were very few literate people. Talented people were even rarer. Truly talented people mostly had their own ambitions and goals. If they couldn't be completely convinced, they couldn't be used. Jiang Pengji wasn't worried about not being able to convince them. She was worried about not being able to find such talents. We'll talk about it after we get the talent. The other problems can be postponed. In her words, once you enter her door, you are her person. It was the same whether he was alive or dead. Her subordinates were only those who had retired, those who were still in office, and those who had died in battle. Whoever wanted to get off halfway would be slapped to death. Yes, she was just that domineering and unreasonable, and she hated betrayal the most. In his previous life, no one had dared to reason with this 7th Division commander. Other than the civil officials, there were also the military generals. After all, they couldn't rely on a group of scholars to fight for the throne, right? The requirements for a general and an ordinary soldier were different. The latter only needed to be bathed in blood and fight, understand how to cooperate with the army, be unafraid of death, and fight the enemy to death. However, a general was different. There were many ways to lead an army to war, and it was not enough to just have a bit of strength. Jiang Pengji could not use the requirements of her previous life to choose people, but the core was the same. Thinking about it this way, it seemed that he had a lot of things to do. Moreover, when she thought about it in detail, she found that military leaders had even fewer choices than scholars. Melancholy. Well, a streamer who did not aim for the emperor was not a good general, there was nothing wrong with that. Jiang Pengji maintained the sly smile of the audience. She did not wait for the groom to bring the stool and jumped down. Is Su Ke back? Jiang Pengji asked abruptly when she saw the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper was confused. He had no idea how his Lang Jun knew. He bowed subconsciously and answered, yes, Su Ke has been waiting for a while. He must have encountered some problems. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, behave well, and don't let outsiders out. The gatekeeper was confused again. Since it was an outsider, he must have been careful not to let outsiders into the house, not to let outsiders out. However, the servants of the Lus were the best at reading other people's minds, and the gatekeeper was no exception. He thought about Jiang Pengji's words from top to bottom. Suddenly, he slapped his forehead and understood. The outsiders in the Lus were the lady's maiden daughter and her servant, who had entered the house the day before. The gatekeeper said that Su Ke had been waiting for her for a long time, but Jiang Pengji saw that he was reading with great interest in the study. He did not feel annoyed at all. Instead, he looked like he did not care about what was going on outside. Is there something wrong with the farm? Jiang Pengji did not greet him. She went straight into the study and sat down in front of the desk. Su Ku was so engrossed in reading that he was almost scared by her. Even though he was scared, Su Ku did not do anything out of line, let alone throw the book in his hand. He put the book back in its original place reluctantly, tidied his clothes, and made sure that he was dressed properly before sitting down again. Su Ku shook his head and took out a self-made booklet from his sleeve. It was filled with tiny words. Bamboo paper was limited, and he was a thrifty person. It would be easy to waste the words if they were too big. Jiang Pengji took it and looked at it. The rules and regulations clearly listed all kinds of data. The content was clear and organized. Even if the words were small, it did not look messy. She was slightly satisfied. Su Ku was indeed talented in internal affairs, and he was a good housekeeper. But, he still lacked a partner. She thought of the county military chief who was hiding somewhere in Hejian County, and her heart began to race. Su Ku asked in a low voice, "Lang Jun, do you see anything?" Jiang Pengji laughed and threw the booklet back to Su Ku. She said angrily, "How can you tell me that the farm was robbed?" Yes, the data in the booklet was very clear. Su Ku did not falsify it, so the problem was very clear. According to the agreement, Su Ku would receive money from the Lus every month to buy daily necessities and grains for the troops. Su Ku was in charge of how to use the money and how to make the best use of it. The prices of the items were all reasonable. Then came the problem. She took a look at all the things Su Ku bought and the changes in the items. She found something strange. Rice, cloth, and the old hen that Su Ku had specially bought for the troops to occasionally eat meat were gone. Of course, they could not be used now. First, the time was not right, and second, the number was not right. The timing wasn't right, because Jiang Pengji had already prepared a few sets of clothes for each of the servants for the season when she had just bought them. There was no need to retailor the clothes. Even if they were to be used as supplementary materials for training, the amount was not right. You didn't catch anyone? Jiang Pengji did not know whether to laugh or cry. She had thought of many possibilities, but she did not expect it to be because of the theft of the farm. Su Ku looked down and said seriously, "Lang Jun is wise." Wise my foot. Chapter 136. Tell me, what's going on? The farm was robbed. Don't tell me you don't have any ideas. Why bother me with such a small matter? Jiang Pengji felt that Su Ku needed more practice. She was not satisfied with his work skills. Seeing that Jiang Pengji was serious, Su Ku put away his frivolous and lazy expression. "I think you still lack a leader," he said seriously. Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows. Su Ku was not frightened by her expression. Instead, he continued, "Lang Jun's method is good, but it's still in the testing stage. It's better to get a ready-made one. What's more, both you and I don't know much about training soldiers. They're not as good as experienced veterans." Jiang Pengji squinted her eyes. "You're saying that the person who stole the rice, cloth, and the hen is an experienced veteran?" Su Ku nodded with certainty. "Yes, I'm sure. Maybe he's an official." Jiang Pengji was speechless. Even though it was too much of a coincidence, she could say that she had guessed the person who stole Su Ku's rice, cloth, and hen. But this group of people is very vigilant and not easy to get close to. If I didn't stay here and learn some hiding methods after being a ranger for a while, I'm afraid it would be difficult to hide from these people. If you want to recruit them, I'm afraid you'll have to wait for some time." "These people? More than one?" Su Ku nodded. "More than one. Based on the footsteps and conversation, there are about 10 people, and most of them are injured. If they weren't injured, it would be difficult for them to hunt. They wouldn't have stolen from someone's farm. People had always despised people who only knew how to crow and steal. That's interesting. Jiang Pengji didn't see them, so she couldn't confirm the identity of the group of people based on Su Ke's words. But she trusted Su Ke's judgment. Otherwise, he could have just brought people to catch the thieves. There was no need for him to ask for her opinion. Even if it wasn't the person she had guessed, he probably had some skills. Go to the accountant's office and get another 10 taels to buy a few more caddies of meat. Also, go to the pharmacy and prepare some medicine. If they want to steal, let them steal. Remember, there's no need to hide it from them. You must let them know that we've discovered their tracks and intend to show them mercy. If one day was not enough, then he would send them for 2 more days. He would send them every day until their injuries were better. In any case, they were not worth much money. What he had eaten from her would eventually be returned. This was also a test. If they had a sense of shame, they would definitely feel ashamed and bashful. This was a way to build a favorable impression. If they did not have any sense of shame or guilt, Jiang Pengji could also change her plan. Her initial impression of these people would also be greatly reduced. In any case, it was just some rice and minced meat, and the investment cost was small. If everything went smoothly, the return would definitely be generous, and it could be considered a steady profit. Su Ke listened to Jiang Pengji's words and maintained a surprised expression. How could he not be shocked? He thought he was shameless enough to scheme against others, but he didn't expect his Lang Jun to be even more shameless. Seeing his stupid expression, Jiang Pengji snorted angrily. Good deeds don't leave their names. They are either really good people or brainless good people. Which one do you think your Lang Jun is? Su Ke was silent. His Lang Jun scheme could not be considered as a good person, but she was not brainless. Therefore, she would not do something like, good deeds don't leave their names. Not only did she have to leave her name after doing a good deed, but she also had to make others feel grateful and guilty. According to the moral standards of this era, 2 words were written on Jiang Pengji's face. Shameless. But he liked it. Su Ke burst into a smile. Jiang Pengji fanned herself and suddenly said, Xiaoyu, you should smile more, so that you don't waste such a good appearance. Su Ke stopped smiling and said stiffly, Lang Jun, you are making fun of me again. She snorted. Last night, I went to Lang Lang Alley with my father. Although I didn't go in, I stayed in Yingshan brothel nearby for half the night. Although Xiaoyu doesn't want to admit it, after careful comparison, I still think that Xiaoyu is 100 times more beautiful than those girls. Su Ke was speechless. There was a lot of information in that sentence. I'll take you there when I'm free. Jiang Pengji added with a smile. Why would Lu Shi suddenly want to take her to a brothel? She wouldn't believe that Su Ke wasn't involved in this. One had to pay for what he had done. Did he think that he could get away unscathed after causing trouble for her? In his dreams. Of course, Jiang Pengji had enjoyed herself last night, but that did not offset the trap that Su Ke had set for her. Su Ke still looked as if he had nothing left to live for. He had faintly realized that his Lang Jun was not only evil, but she also had a bad taste. What else could he do other than lie down and let her tease him? He only hoped that his Lang Jun was not gay and did not like men. Otherwise, he would feel a lot of pressure. Although the world nowadays liked men, there were still a few straight men who scoffed at this phenomenon, such as Su Ke. Jiang Pengji did not know what Su Ke was worried about. Even if she knew, she probably would not care. First of all, although she liked men, a rabbit would not eat the grass near its nest. She still had her principles when it came to right and wrong. Under the premise that she was a superior and a subordinate, she would keep a safe distance from the opposite sex or female subordinates who had a partner. She did not want any scandals to spread and bring fear to other families. That was completely unacceptable for Jiang Pengji, who had high mental requirements. That was not the only thing that Su Ku had come to talk about, but it was more important, so he mentioned it first. After the servants used the prescription that you gave them, the effect was very good. During the second day of training, they were in good spirits. For people who did not exercise often, when they suddenly received a large amount of exercise, their bodily functions would have serious discomfort. Muscle soreness was considered mild. This caused the training on the second day to be affected by the fatigue from the previous day's training, and the efficiency was extremely low. Jiang Pengji had left a massage prescription with pictures and words. Every technique was marked with the parts that needed attention and the appropriate amount of strength. Almost everyone could learn it. Su Ku made all the servants memorize it and apply it on the spot. The effect was indeed good. According to the servants, their 4 limbs were originally stiff and sore, and they couldn't feel where their arms and legs were. However, after massaging them according to the prescription, their 4 limbs became warm, and the soreness was greatly reduced. It was so comfortable that it was like soaking in a hot bath. Jiang Pengji was not surprised by this reaction. This kind of massage technique was originally compatible with military school students' training. After all, not everyone had the luxury of using nutrient solutions to relieve the pressure of training. Most ordinary students relied on this technique, and it had been tested and improved countless times. It was absolutely effective and safe. Chapter 137. I've seen what you've written. This is just the beginning. Anyone can do well if they put in all their effort. However, the most important thing about this kind of thing is perseverance. It's not hard to train hard for 1 or 2 days, but it's hard to do it all year round and even cultivate it into a habit. These people did not have the qualities that an elite soldier should have. Jiang Pengji was not as optimistic as Su Ku. She had led the most elite lion troop, and her eyes had long been trained to be picky. If she were to choose according to her standards, she would not be able to find a soldier who could completely meet her requirements in thousands of years. Of course, the situation of war in ancient times was different, and the conditions could not be so harsh. Su Ku saw that Jiang Pengji didn't seem to be satisfied or dissatisfied at all. He sighed in his heart. Lang Jun was indeed someone who wanted to do big things. She didn't know what had happened last night, but she felt that Lang Jun's ambition had become more and more obvious. I'll try my best to supervise you. I won't let you down, Su Ku promised seriously. Jiang Pengji snorted. Why would I be disappointed? Su Ku was startled. His lips moved, and just as he was about to speak, Jiang Pengji interrupted him again. If they don't train seriously, they'll lose their lives. Let me tell you something. There's been a commotion in Tsang Prefecture's Meng County. I'm afraid it'll be difficult to quell the civil unrest. The distance between Hejian County and Meng County in Tsangzhou was less than half a month. If the rebels and bandits enter Hejian County, these people will not only have to wipe out the bandits in the mountains near Hejian County, but they will also have to deal with the rebels and bandits who are desperate. Jiang Pengji's eyes were fierce. Her eyes carried a murderous aura that even experienced generals might not have. It made people shiver. I've said it before. The Liu family doesn't raise useless people. She said coldly, if you don't want to live, then you'll die. For Jiang Pengji, the wars in the ancient times were at most labeled as violent. They were far from being cruel. After seeing a true mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, as well as a true purgatory on earth, the others were nothing more than this. Su Ku's eyes widened slightly. He did not seem to notice the words in front of him. His attention was completely focused on the sentence, there's something unusual in Meng County, Tsang Prefecture. Meng County, Tsang Prefecture. Su Ku was shocked out of his wits. He then said, "That concerns the vital point of Dongqing. How could there be civil unrest?" Jiang Pengji rolled her glasses and said nonchalantly, "If it's chaotic, then so be it. What does that have to do with me?" Su Ku almost choked on his own saliva after hearing her words. Although the Dongqing royal family was unpopular, the power of the aristocratic families was increasing day by day, and the monarch of a country was no longer as deterrent as before, nor was it as charming as before to attract the loyalty of scholars. Dongqing was still a country. His Lungjuan's father was still the Dongqing commander-in-chief. Was it really okay for him to say this so bluntly? Without waiting for Su Ku to speak, Jiang Pengji said, "I'm just a commoner. How can I have a say in national affairs?" The civil unrest in Tsang Prefecture and Meng County would naturally worry the important officials of the imperial court. Speaking of which, it really has nothing to do with me. There was nothing wrong with his words. Su Ku was completely speechless. Even though his words were a little crooked, he still managed to make it sound. To be honest, Su Ku felt that he was rebellious. No one in the world could be more rebellious than him, until he met his Lang Jun. This was like comparing a small sorcerer to a great sorcerer. They were not on the same level at all. "Lang Jun, you're right." Even though he was conflicted, he still put on a bright smile. Su Ku thought for a while and said, "If what you said is true, the civil unrest in Tsang Prefecture and Meng County will spread to Hejian County in 2 or 3 months. At the very least, there will be news about it. That's for sure." Communication in ancient times was indeed slow, but 2 or 3 months were enough for the news of the civil unrest in Tsang Prefecture and Meng County to spread to Hejian County. Su Ku cupped his hands and said, "If so, I'm afraid I have a presumptuous request." "What presumptuous request? Just say it." Su Ku said with some embarrassment, "Even if the civil unrest won't spread to Hejian County, people will be in a panic. I'm afraid the price of rice and cloth will soar. According to my previous calculation, the daily needs of the farmers and soldiers can be bought once every 10 days. If the news of the civil unrest in Tsang Prefecture spreads and the price of rice increases, I'm afraid the money that can be used for 10 days won't be enough for 3 or 5 days. Jiang Pengji looked at him. Did he want to stock up on food in advance? In this era, it was important to have food in hand and not panic. Food was the most important thing. As Su Ku said, if the news of the civil unrest in Tsang Prefecture and Meng County spread to Hejian County, the price of cheap rice would skyrocket. It would be too expensive to buy. Since the Lus knew the news in advance, they should buy some rice as soon as possible when the price was cheap, just in case they needed it. Under normal circumstances, it was a good way to make money. She remembered that in her previous life, many big forces in the Federation relied on this method to resell war supplies. They bought it at a low price and sold it at a high price. Finally, they became the local leaders. But Jiang Pengji gave up after thinking about it. It was not that she was not interested, but it was too evil. Although she did not like the ancient times, she could not bully the common people. True experts relied on defeating stronger opponents and using them as a cornerstone to climb higher step by step, not by bullying the weak. Although she did not agree with it, she had to admit that Su Ku's words did remind her. "I can't do evil things, but I can buy rice for my own use," Jiang Pengji said. "When the time comes, you can go to the accountant and get some money. Put it on my account and buy another batch of rice. It should be enough for the people in the farm to eat for half a year." Although Dongqing was declining, the deterrence of the country was still there. Tsang Prefecture and Meng County were located in a dangerous place, so the court would not really leave it alone. The civil unrest would only be in a small area, and it would not spread to other counties in Dongqing. Therefore, it should be enough for 20 to 30 people to eat for half a year. Su Ku waited for a while, but Jiang Pengji did not speak again. He hesitated for a while and then spoke in a low voice. Lang Jun, do you have any other orders? Jiang Pengji frowned. No. If you have any ideas, just say it. Don't be so hesitant. Su Ke said gently, Lang Jun, it is indeed a good thing that you do not exploit the people for profit. But if you don't do it, I think the other gentry families in Hejian County will not let go of this opportunity. Most of them have fertile fields and their granaries are overflowing. She sneered. Others go to eat a pile of shit, but it does not mean that the shit is really fragrant. Why should I eat it? Su Ke was speechless. No, that is not what I want to say. Su Ke took a deep breath and tried hard to throw Jiang Pengji's strange but vivid metaphor out of his mind. It was too magical. Otherwise, he could not help but imagine a group of people eating a pile of shit and he would go to eat it. Chapter 138. But you've reminded me of something. Jiang Pengji furrowed her brows as she thought of something interesting. The corners of her lips curled up into a creepy smile. The sage once said that one would be a bastard if they didn't take advantage of others. This is indeed a good opportunity. Su Ke's lips parted slightly, but he was too shocked to say anything. Which saint had said such vulgar and shameless words? Stand up and be beaten to death. Since Jiang Pengji had decided to stir up trouble, she definitely needed the initial capital. As for how to roll the initial capital into a big snowball through a series of means, or even shake the whole world, she already had a vague direction in her mind. Based on Su Ke's position and character, he wouldn't instigate him to exploit and oppress the common people. In other words, if this kid really had any ideas, he would definitely target the landowning households and country gentlemen. Was he planning to take advantage of the situation and turn the tables on them? For a moment, a few classic cases of starting from scratch flashed through her mind. Although the two eras were completely different, the pursuit of profit was the same in the bones of humans. Jiang Pengji kept a faint smile on her face. Tell me your plan in detail. If I think it's good, I can consider adopting it. Her words obviously poked Su Ke's itch. His eyes flashed and he immediately threw away the slight prejudice in his heart. Although his Lengjuan's temperament was a little strange, his temperament was extremely to his liking, especially when it came to using people. Just because of this, even if his Lengjuan's temper was unruly, he could still pinch his nose and bear it. Su Ke cupped his hands and said, Sorry to offend you. Lang Jun, please come closer. Oh, it seemed that the content was really something. She actually had to whisper to him. Jiang Pengji smiled and took a few steps forward. Su Ke lowered his voice and said, Before I answer you, I have something to ask you. Where did you learn about the civil unrest in Meng County, Tsang Prefecture? When will it spread to Hejian County and nearby counties? She thought for a moment, then said, I first heard it from Wen Zheng. You don't know Wen Zheng, but he's a very interesting man. He must have heard this from a merchant from Meng County. I heard from him that the Meng army was very powerful. They actually sent soldiers to lock down Meng County and set up various checkpoints in Tsang Prefecture. They said that they were going to capture the traitors. The refugees would definitely not be able to move so quickly, but the merchants were different. They traveled from south to north, and they had their own caravans. A lot of news was spread through them. The Meng army could detain them and delay them, but they couldn't really detain them and prevent them from traveling. After all, Tsangzhou's current prosperity was inseparable from the caravans that traveled north and south. However, even if these caravans could leave Tsangzhou and bring the news to the outside world, these people would be repeatedly warned before they left. Most of the merchants were afraid of the Meng family's power in Tsangzhou, and they needed to rely on the profits here, so most of them would keep their mouths shut. A small portion of the remaining merchants might have decided to leave Zhangzhou after this incident because they had a strong foundation in Zhangzhou. It was these traveling merchants who could spread the news about Zhang Prefecture and Meng County to the outside world. Is this information reliable? Su Ku asked. Reliable. Absolutely reliable. Jiang Pengji's lips curled into a bloodthirsty smile when she thought of Meng Liang and his servant in her mansion. There was no other evidence more reliable than this pair of master and servant regarding the chaos in Zhang Prefecture's Meng County. Su Ku pondered and said, "It's only been a month since the spring plowing ended. If we wait for the chaos in Zhang Prefecture's Meng County to spread, I'm afraid we'll have to wait for the summer planting, which is far from the autumn harvest. The farmers are still short of money, and they've probably spent half of the previous year's harvest. If the chaos really spread, the people will be anxious and will stock up on rice. How could the unscrupulous rice merchants let go of such a good opportunity? As the saying went, with food in hand, one would not panic. If the chaos in Zhang Prefecture's Meng County spread, how would the people react?" This was a question that could be easily answered. Su Ku could even imagine how high the price of grain would go. It wasn't an unfounded fear. It wasn't the first time he had witnessed such a scene when he was young. His mother sewed, mended, and washed clothes for others. The few acres of farmland that she had planted had all been sold. The small amount of money that she had worked hard to save for a year was not even enough to buy 20% of the food she had before. In other words, the price of food had increased to 5 times or even more than the usual price. Why would those merchants and wealthy families who had rice granaries in their hands care about the common people who couldn't afford rice and could only endure the starvation? Dongqing had been suffering from drought and floods for years, so there was a shortage of grain. The people who couldn't afford it could only dig up wild grass and tree roots, or even eat guanine clay. He had been a ranger for a period of time, hoping to help the weak. He had been to many places, and the scenes he had seen were even more shocking. "Merchants have always been after profits," Jiang Pengji said. "That's not strange. What I'm more curious about is that you're trying to get something for nothing." Su Ku was stunned, and then he said with admiration, "Getting something for nothing? Lang Jun, that's a good description." She said with certainty, "If that's the case, I think you'll need some grain to run your business." Su Ku's eyes lit up. He gritted his teeth and said, "Although it's against the way of a gentleman, I promise I won't hurt the people." "What do you promise me? Are you afraid I won't agree?" Jiang Pengji suddenly smiled. Under Su Ku's shocked gaze, she said, "I was thinking that you need to change your temperament, so that you won't be at a disadvantage when you go against me. Now that I see it, it's right." Without waiting for Su Ku to speak, she added, "As a person, you can't be at a disadvantage no matter what. Getting something for nothing, I like it too." Jiang Pengji had already guessed Su Ku's plan. In her era, this kind of scheme was probably left behind by a merchant when he was young. However, in this era, it was extremely bold and out of line. The people of the world looked down on merchants and looked down on them. Naturally, they did not think of how to scheme against them in their inherent impression. Su Ku was indeed the accountant she liked. He was good at managing internal affairs, and now he had some awareness. His plan was similar to stock speculation, but it was more brutal. Plus, the information was not transmitted well, so there was a lot of room for manipulation. But Jiang Pengji changed the topic and said with some embarrassment, "The key is where are we going to get such a large amount of grain?" The smile on Su Ku's face froze. That was true. Although his plan was good, and he was 100% sure that he could make a lot of money, it was not easy to get the grain to start the operation, let alone get something for nothing. His cancer of awkwardness was acting up. He was very confident in this plan, and he was sure that he could make a lot of money for his Lang Jun, but he neglected the most basic condition. Chapter 139. Xian Rua Bing Qing, what is this called? Die before achieving victory? Jiang Pengji furrowed her brows. Looking at the screen full of ha ha ha, not only did she not feel annoyed, but she also revealed an evil smile. Lang Jun, do you have a solution? Su Ku asked. In fact, he hoped that Jiang Pengji would ask Lu Shi for help. The second branch of the Lu family was very rich. It would not be a problem for them to get that batch of grain. From his point of view, Jiang Pengji was Lu Shi's only legitimate son. It was a matter of course for her to inherit all of Lu Shi's property. The illegitimate sons in the backyard would at most get half of it and some cultural relics and antiques. If Lu Shi also agreed, the matter was in the bag. Yes, I do. I'm thinking, since it's a trick, why not be more thorough? The curve of Jiang Pengji's lips was very precise. It was neither cordial nor distant. It was just right. More thorough? Su Ming was dumbfounded. Tudu Feichio, every time the host smiles like this, I get goosebumps. Who's going to be unlucky this time? In the entire streaming room, it seemed like the person who understood Jiang Pengji the most was the viewer who had been following the live stream since the beginning. Jiang Pengji's style of doing things could be described as swift and fierce, but it could also be described as indecisive. When it came to enemies, she would never kill them in one go. Instead, she would repeatedly check if the other party still had any value to exploit. If there was, she would allow the other party to live for 2 more days. If there wasn't, she would only kill them once she was sure that they had no value. She squinted her eyes and smiled meaningfully. Xiaoyu, do you know where the culprit who caused the chaos in Meng County in Zhangzhou is now? Su Ku was puzzled. He did not understand the connection between this and what he had said before. In terms of wealth, how many families in Dongqing can compare to the Meng family in Zhangzhou? Exchanging a legitimate son for a batch of grains, it's worth it. Su Ku's eyes widened. After a long while, he said, Lang Jun, are you saying that person is in the mansion? Jiang Pengji opened her sandalwood fan and covered her smile with a smile. She said in a mocking tone, well, you sent yourself to me. So, you want to disguise yourself as a bandit and force the Meng family to exchange food for people? That won't do. If that's the case, all Meng Liang has to do is say a few words, and the whole thing will be exposed. Su Ku shook his head disapprovingly. However, he had always been alert, and he vaguely sensed that something was wrong. Although he had only spent a few days with this Lang Jun, it was enough for him to understand a fact. His Lang Jun was a black-hearted and merciless person. He would not do anything without benefits, and he would never shoot himself in the foot. Stupid. Does your Lang Jun look like a brainless person? Jiang Pengji snorted coldly and said with disdain, of course we'll let Meng Liang write a letter and send his confidants to ask the Mengs for the grain. What we need to do is arrange for someone to take over. As for Meng Liang's slip of the tongue. Do you think he can still live after what he did in Zhangzhou and still want to do whatever he wants in Hejian County? In ancient times, there was a saying, dead people don't talk, and they don't leak secrets. It would be even better if they died without a whole body. Of course, in her era, it was a slap in the face, because dead bodies were more likely to leak secrets than living people. However, in this extremely backward era, as long as Meng Liang was dead, no one would be able to get anything on her. Su Ku was speechless. Lang Jun, you mean, after using Meng Liang, then, as he spoke, he made a chopping motion with his hand. Jiang Pengji snorted. In your eyes, your Lang Jun is so unbearable? Su Ku was dumbfounded. He felt like he could barely recognize the words Jiang Pengji said. What do you plan to do, Lang Jun? Jiang Pengji shook her head and looked at him with disdain. Do you know the basic requirement of a scheme? That is, all the benefits belong to you, and all the blame is on others. People can't say anything bad about you, and you have to maintain a pure and untainted appearance. Not to mention Suko's opinion of her words, the audience in the streaming room felt like they could no longer suppress the power of the primeval times. De Zhuangzhu Furen, only the host can describe shamelessness in such a refined and elegant way. Consulting Detective Curly Hair, as a newbie in the streaming room, I have heard of Meng Liang's shamelessness and disgusting nature. However, when this unlucky kid met the host, I feel sorry for him. What did this kid do in his previous life to meet the host? Shenjun Honglian, same. I feel sorry for him too. I feel like he won't even know how he died when he met the host. Although Jiang Pengji was so dark that her original form could no longer be seen, she was far more popular than the Virgin of 100 Flowers. The audience in the streaming room watched the live stream for novelty and pleasure. What she did really tickled the itch in their hearts. 1 word, pleasure. 2 words, pleasure. Inmei Xiangguazi, #laughter-cry. Am I the only one who noticed that the host said that it was the basic requirement of a scheme? Then what is the next step? I'm trembling in fear. I pity the host's future opponent in advance. The system was already having a headache over Jiang Pengji's self-indulgent behavior of bullying a little kid. The system said, even so, what if the Mengs trace the food back to you? Jiang Pengji said indifferently, I don't have any capital to buy food. How can I continue if I don't think of a way? Hearing her words, the system carefully observed Jiang Pengji's expression and hesitantly said, Host, doesn't your father have a lot of money? The dowry he gave you before. Bah, the list of assets listed in the granary has a lot of food. If you don't want to rely on Lu Shi, there are exchange and loan services in the mall. You can get as much food as you want. There's no need to take risks. She had money. If Jiang Pengji wanted to, she could exchange a large amount of food through the system. Why would she take the risk? Jiang Pengji said, I don't want to do that for 3 reasons. First, Lu Shi is Lu Shi, and I am me. I don't want to touch the old man's coffin. Second, I can get a batch of food through you, but how can I explain the source of the food? Lu Shi is a real fox. Do you think he won't be suspicious because I am his daughter? You are thinking too much. As for the third reason, which is the most important one. System, don't you think it's more interesting? Things that are too easy to get are harder to cherish because it's too easy to get. In my opinion, the added value is too low. In other words, Jiang Pengji liked to do it, mostly because it was risky and she found it interesting. Chapter 140. After speaking for a long time, the system remained silent. Jiang Pengji was bored. Forget it. Why am I talking to a system like you? You don't understand the thrill. System, what sin did it commit to have such a troublesome and gentlemanly, perverted, host? I think, even if I leveled up to 0, I might not be able to keep up with you. Jiang Pengji smiled. Fine. It's okay if you can't keep up. It'll be more fun to bully you. System. You're shameless enough to say what's on your mind. Not only was the system shocked by Jiang Pengji's shamelessness, but Su Ku also said that his Langjun was still his Langjun. Why do you look so shocked? Jiang Pengji said unhappily. It's decided for now. Do what you need to do for the next few days. Don't be so nervous. As for the thieves, just do what I told you to do. Su Ku cupped his hands in front of his chest and said yes. He wasn't a pedantic person to begin with. If he was a true gentleman, he might not be able to stand her shameless and outrageous behavior. Even if he didn't say it out loud, his impression of her would be greatly reduced in his heart. But Su Ku came from an ordinary family. He used to be a ranger, and he experienced the tragic death of his mother. He was thrown into jail and almost lost his life. He was more accepting of such behavior than normal people. Moreover, as long as Jiang Pengji did not harm his own interests, and she did not dig her own grave, he would not say anything to stop her. At most, he would think of a way to smooth things over. At the very least, he didn't like Meng Liang, who was a malignant tumor that didn't do anything. If he died, then so be it. If he could get the most benefits for his loyal Lang Jun before he died, then it would be a worthy death. Su Ku would have to be crazy to think about Meng Liang. Jiang Pengji looked like she was reading the bamboo slips carefully, but she was actually multitasking. A plan quickly formed in her mind. System. The system, which was pretending to be deaf and dumb, heard her calling it in her mind. It did not care about throwing a tantrum and immediately replied. "What can I do for you?" Jiang Pengji asked the system. "I just activated the mission streaming mode not long ago. There shouldn't be any restrictions, right? What I mean is there a time interval between 2 live broadcasts of the mission? If there are no restrictions, I would like to open it again." The system was stunned. When did its host become so hardworking? According to the other party's personality, the system said after some deliberation, "There are no restrictions, but this kind of live broadcast with the nature of completing a mission is usually more tiring. The host usually takes a break before starting the next mission live broadcast." Jiang Pengji said, "It's good that there is no time limit." Last time, it was a fully interactive live stream, and the content was voted on by the audience. This time, I'll change to a semi-interactive live stream. I'll decide on the theme. If you want to level up, it's best if you do it within the next 2 days. The mission broadcast mode that I've chosen may last for quite a long time, so it can be considered a small unit. The system grunted and replied, "I've decided to upgrade after today's live stream ends. It's estimated to be 12 hours, so it won't affect the host's daily live stream the next day." About the semi-interactive live stream, has the host already thought of the live stream theme? Even though the system felt a little uneasy, it was naturally happy that the host was willing to work hard on the live stream. After all, the host and the system were bound together for good and bad. "I have a theme. You can put up a preview title and tell the audience in the live stream." Jiang Pengji suddenly laughed wickedly. "The theme of this live stream is, how to kill Meng Liang gracefully and efficiently." The system said. "Huh? Host, are you really going to become a gentleman, pervert? Just put up the title. Don't ask too many questions. I know what I'm doing, and I won't mess up the live stream." Soon, the audience in the live stream room saw a new title appear on the screen. Preview of the next live stream, How to Kill Meng Liang Gracefully and Efficiently. Stay tuned. In the next second, the bullet screen that was full of bullet screens changed in unison. "Chun Lai, can I ask if the next live stream is tomorrow? If it is, I'm going to stay in the live stream room today." Zhen de Jiangshan Ruhua, when the host says to kill Meng Liang, she really wants him to die. I feel sorry for Meng Liang. Kojiao Qi Fan, although it's wrong to kill people, why am I so excited when I see the preview? Tang Roasted Chestnuts, I'm looking forward to it, but I want to know when the live stream will start so I can catch up. Although the live stream room's upper limit had been increased to 10,000 people, it was still not enough for the audience. To get a spot in the live stream room, one had to overcome many obstacles. One had to have good internet speed, hand speed, and luck. If they could know when the live stream would start in advance, they would have a higher chance of getting a spot in the room. There were more and more people asking about the live stream. How could Jiang Pengji let go of such a good opportunity? Host V, the exact time has not been confirmed yet. You can follow the live stream room first. I will inform you as soon as the live stream starts. That's right. Many of the audience members understood and followed the live stream room. With one sentence, Jiang Pengji's live stream room gained a few thousand more subscribers. The system was speechless. Although the host did not like live streaming, her ability to seize every opportunity that was beneficial to her was impressive. After making arrangements for Su Ku, Jiang Pengji read for a while. Then she summoned the housekeeper and asked him about Meng Liang and his servant's actions. The old housekeeper seemed to be prepared. He reported Meng Liang's entire day's schedule in detail. He had been the housekeeper of the Lus for many years. How could he not be smart and capable? He knew about Meng Liang's situation, but as a servant, he knew what to say and what not to say. All he had to do was keep it in mind. No matter whose son Meng Liang was, whether he was a dragon or a tiger, he had to kneel before him, let alone a worm. Keep an eye on Meng Liang. Let me know immediately if there's any news. At this point, Jiang Pengji suddenly paused and added, in addition, when the servants wash their clothes and tidy up their rooms, tell them to pay attention to the items that the master and servant are carrying with them. Also, don't let them get close to the kitchen. As she spoke, she took out the sachet from Enchanting house. Even if the housekeeper was knowledgeable, he would not know what it was. Chapter 141. We provide you with exciting novels to read. Jiang Pengji sneered. The dried herbs inside have the ability to confuse one's mind. If you grind them and turn them into spices and burn them in an incense burner or mix them with food, it can make people sweat, increase their heartbeat, narrow their minds, and create a sense of pleasure. Of course, if you put too much of it in, it can make people's hearts stop beating, their limbs twitch, and their mouths foam. The audience in the live broadcast room heard her words and became vigilant. Why did these descriptions sound so much like those things? Kojiao Dandan, damn, these spices can't be poppies, right? Zhenda Jiangshan Ruhua, have some common sense. How is this poppies? I'm a student of traditional Chinese medicine, but I've never seen anything like this. The world that the streamer is in is different from ours. It's normal to see strange plants. Teng Chao Lizi, streamer, it's better to destroy these things as soon as possible. I'm scared just by looking at them. Not only were the audience in the streaming room scared, but the old housekeeper also trembled. His face was full of shock and worry. How could his Lang Jun have such an insidious thing? Lang Jun, do you want me to mix these into Meng Liang and his servants' meals? Before the old housekeeper could finish his sentence, Jiang Pengji interrupted him. I got these things from somewhere else, but they're related to Meng Liang. I'm afraid they have these things with them too. It would be bad if they were made into powder and mixed with spices or food that has a strong taste. She purposely exaggerated the negative effects. The spices did have the effects she said, but they needed to be purified and concentrated. At the moment, if the dosage was right, it was a kind of spices that could refresh one's mind. However, the herbs in the 2 sachets in her hands had been purified in large quantities. If they were placed in a room with poor ventilation for a long time, it would indeed cause one to be in a trance. Those bastards had defiled so many women. The spices must have contributed to it. Jiang Pengji wanted to keep Meng Liang and his servant alive for a few more days, but that didn't mean she wouldn't restrict their actions. If they were to fool around in the last few days of their lives and hurt some innocent women, wouldn't Jiang Pengji be their accomplice? Not to mention that the master and his servant had their eyes on the second lady and the other women in the inner court. Hee, you really won't die if you don't court death. Since they didn't cherish their lives, then she would make full use of them. She didn't need to feel any negative emotions. When the old butler heard this, he instantly became spirited. His old face was filled with anger as he said fiercely, if that bastard really dares to harm people, this servant will personally break his legs. This is the Lu mansion of Hejian County, not the Meng mansion of Cangzhou. Jiang Pengji was secretly amused and said, "Send someone to keep an eye on them in case they cause any trouble. Anyway, in a few days, they will leave the Lu residence. They won't be an eyesore to you. Maybe, you won't have this chance in the future." The old butler solemnly accepted the order, but when his gaze fell on the two sachets, he hesitated. After some thought, he tried to dissuade her. "Since Lang Jun knows that it's harmful, how can you keep it with you? Forgive this old servant for overstepping my bounds, but this thing should be burned as soon as possible." Jiang Pengji shook her head and turned the sachet in her hand. She opened her thin lips and said, "How could I not understand the housekeeper's good intentions? However, this thing still had its uses. I know it's harmful, so why wouldn't I guard against it? I won't let it harm me." The old butler sighed. Lang Jun, who had watched him grow up, was becoming more and more assertive. "Since Lang Jun already has a plan, I won't say anything. I just hope that Lang Jun will put yourself first in everything you do." Even though the old butler was a servant of the Lu residence, he had worked for the Lu residence his entire life. He had also watched Jiang Pengji grow up. To be honest, he had long regarded Lang Jun as his own grandchild. Naturally, he didn't want to see her get hurt. "Yes, I know what I'm doing. Don't worry, housekeeper." Jiang Pengji nodded. She was playing with others, and she was happy for herself. How could she be stupid enough to get herself into trouble? That was all he had to say, but he suddenly thought of something and said to the housekeeper, "By the way, as for Su Ku, ask someone to find out if he has any relatives in his family. If they are close to Su Ku, take care of them." The housekeeper was stunned. He didn't expect his Lang Jun to think so highly of Su Ku. However, when he thought of his master's attitude toward Su Ku, the old housekeeper calmed down a lot. He couldn't help but wonder if Su Ku had a bright future. "Yes, housekeeper." Jiang Pengji nodded. "I trust you, housekeeper." She suddenly made this decision not because of anything else, but because she suddenly remembered what Lu Shi had told her. In this era, blood ties were highly valued, followed by non-blood relationships such as teacher-student friendships. The structure of the social relationships between people was very different from the society she was familiar with in the past. For example, in the matter between the second lady and Meng Liang, in her opinion, Meng Liang deserved to die. No matter how much she cared about the second lady's feelings, it couldn't erase Meng Liang's sins. The answer was no, so Meng Liang had to die. Thinking about it was a waste of time. But in the eyes of the people in this world, her normal reaction seemed too cold-blooded, even heartless. Of course, that didn't mean that she was a person with high IQ but low EQ. In fact, her EQ was quite high. So after realizing that, she had to change her way of doing things. She had to take that into account when she thought about things. Su Ku was the guinea pig for the experiment. The housekeeper was swift and decisive. He was much more decisive than the younger ones. "Lang Jun, this is what they're hiding." He pushed a delicate rouge box the size of a thumb forward. The old housekeeper was so angry that he almost blew his beard and glared at them. If it wasn't for Jiang Pengji's special instructions, who would have thought that the master and servant would bring such a dirty thing into the Lu residence? But the Lu's was not the palace. They wouldn't search people when they entered or left, and they wouldn't check the luggage of their guests. It's quite an exquisite effect. Jiang Pengji took the box and opened it. She saw that the powder in the box had been pressed into the shape of a cake. Even from a distance, she could smell the rich and refreshing fragrance. If she breathed it for a long time, she would feel uncomfortable and hot all over. The old housekeeper saw that she was about to touch the powder with her finger and quickly stopped her. He said, "Lang Jun, don't be careless. This thing." Chapter 142. The box was the size of a fingernail. Inside it was the powder of the herbs that had been purified and ground. It was also mixed with other strong spices that could invigorate blood circulation. It would make one's mouth dry, skin warm up, and hallucinate. It was the same effect as the legendary aphrodisiac. Even though the technology in this era was not that great, the products that were related to reproduction were quite well developed. She wiped off the powder with a handkerchief and closed the box. That's all? The old housekeeper saw that she looked normal and her eyes were clear. He could not help but sigh in relief. Remembering the servant's reply, he blushed. Of course there's more. There are other, ridiculous things. But I didn't want to dirty your eyes and ears, and I didn't want to alert the enemy, so I didn't take those things out. Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows. She could guess what the old housekeeper was talking about. It was probably a little tool for he. She had been single for years and didn't know anything. You should talk to my father about this. He should know what to do. That Meng Liang is not a good person. Who knows what kind of good intentions he has for bringing these things into the Lu manor. Jiang Pengji said as she put the box into her purse. The old housekeeper wanted to take the box, but he froze halfway. Since Meng Liang was the second lady's son and entered the manor as the second lady's niece, it was logical for him to eat with the second lady in the name of filial piety. Looking at the mature woman sitting at the head of the table, he suddenly felt his mouth go dry. She was his father's first wife, and she was also his birth mother, in name. The two taboos made him excited. Just thinking about it made him want to make a move. However, this was the Lu residence, so he didn't dare to do anything in public. Compared to forcing things, he preferred to give in. It was more interesting that way. He could not help but smile when he thought about how the mistress of the Lu manor had become his woman without anyone knowing. The second lady sat at the head of the table and looked at her wife coldly. She felt sick inside. What are you thinking about? Why are you so happy? She put down her chopsticks. Seeing such a disgusting person, it would be strange if her appetite was good. Meng Liang immediately came back to his senses and put away the thoughts in his heart. He said respectfully, when I was in the Meng mansion, I always wanted to reunite with you. I looked forward to it day and night. I didn't expect that my dream would come true. I can't contain my joy. I've made a fool of myself in front of you, mother. TSK, this mouth of his was as glib as his father. Unfortunately, who didn't know what color his stomach was? The second madam was disgusted, but she maintained a neutral attitude on the surface. It must have been hard on you. Mother's body is at peace now. No matter how much pain I suffer, I won't feel bitter. It's all worth it. If it were a normal mother and son, the mother would feel relieved even if she was not moved when hearing such words. However, when she thought of the child she had painstakingly given birth to, the son with a cinnabar mole between his eyebrows was replaced by the son of a concubine and enjoyed the generous treatment of the legitimate son of the Meng family. Her son was killed by that B***tch alone and did not even have a name after his death. Every time she thought of this, the second madam felt a flame of hatred burning in her heart, forcing her to the brink of collapse. When she was in a bad mood, the second madam found an excuse to send Meng Liang out. He still wore the mask of a filial son, so he naturally did not dare to disobey. However, Meng Liang did not dare to get angry at the second madam, but couldn't he vent his anger on the manservant beside him? The manservant was loved by Meng Liang and was still living a comfortable life. Naturally, he had a way to appease Meng Liang. It's my honor to scold and hit you, Lang Jun. The servant's face was slapped a few times, and both sides of his cheeks quickly became red and swollen. His skin was thin and fair, so the two palm marks were very obvious. However, if others saw it and misunderstood Lang Jun, wouldn't it be your servant's fault? Please calm down. When we enter the room, you can scold me however you want. Be careful that your hand hurts. Meng Liang was so angry that he snorted heavily. He entered the room, sat down, and gulped down 2 cups of tea. The manservant knew Meng Liang very well. Once he showed such an attitude, he must have been humiliated by someone. Humph, what a cold-hearted woman. No wonder father hated her to the core. Meng Liang thought of the second madam's perfunctory attitude. He could not help but feel angry. He had not even been this filial to his own mother, but that woman was still so pretentious. She had even sent him out hastily just now. It was such a disgrace. The manservant rolled his eyes and said, Lang Jun, don't be angry. You were raised by master, so it's normal for her to not be close to you. Then what else can I do? She's always guarded against me. She doesn't even drink the porridge I sent her, and she doesn't let me get close to her. The manservant thought about it and said, in my opinion, Lang Jun can be a little more indirect. She fell out of favor not long after she gave birth to her son. Later, she remarried Lu Zhongqing. She cares about Lu Zhongqing's second legitimate son, so it's not like she didn't fall in love with him. It's obvious that she still cares about her son. How about this, Lang Jun, get closer to Lu Lang Jun and be on good terms with him. That way, Madam's attitude will naturally soften. Meng Liang raised his head and looked at the manservant suspiciously. You stupid advisor, do you think this suggestion will work? The manservant let out a sigh of relief. Lang Jun, why don't you give it a try and you'll know. If this doesn't work, it won't be too late for you to settle the score with me. You're that madam's biological son. No matter how cold she looks, she's still on your side. What's more, Lu Lang Jun is the legitimate son of Lu Zhongqing's first wife. If that madam gives birth to a legitimate son in the future, wouldn't her child be inferior to Lu Lang Jun? Seeing that Meng Liang's expression had softened a little, he fanned the flames again. In other words, don't think that madam treats Lu Lang Jun so well. She doesn't even know how much she hates him. No matter how distant you are from her, you're still biological mother and son. Meng Liang thought about it and felt that it made sense. Let's give it a try for now. If it doesn't work, then it's a bad idea. Be careful of your skin and flesh. The manservant smiled and flattered, but he was secretly relieved. He thought that he had diverted the trouble to Jiang Pengji, but he had no idea that he had fallen into Jiang Pengji's trap. She had already dug a few holes for Meng Liang to jump into. She would definitely squeeze out every last bit of value from him and let him die a quiet death. That night, 2 or 3 people quietly sneaked into the farm. Chapter 143. Among them, the most well-built man raised his hand to wipe the sweat off his face. His black and white eyes seemed especially resolute and spirited in the dark. There were still a few unhealed wounds on his face, and congealed blood stained his face. He looked like an Azura in the dark night. It seems that the owner of the farm isn't an ordinary person. These were left for us on purpose, our whereabouts have been exposed. Then, what should we do now, Captain? They were extremely disgusted with thieves, but they were at their wits' end now. If they didn't do this, the brothers who had escaped with them would either die of illness or from a relapse of their injuries. They had no choice but to do this. They were also very careful, and each household only took a small amount for emergencies. Logically speaking, it shouldn't arouse suspicion in a short period of time. Just keep it. What else can we do? The man called Captain bent over and picked up the wrapped items. If the owner of the farm had any ill intentions, he would have been waiting for us with the bailiffs. Why would he be so quiet? What about these? The man's companions were slightly hesitant. The captain said, it's probably because the owner is kind. Seeing that we didn't steal everything and only took some, he probably guessed that we weren't in a good situation, so he secretly helped us. Take the items away and remember this kindness in our hearts. We'll find a way to repay him in the future. The captain couldn't be blamed for thinking this way. They had been to many farms, and this was the richest one. It was also the one with the most food. The few tenant farmers in this farm didn't live a good life, but they had enough to eat and wear. They even had a lot of surplus and could save up money. He had seen many tenant farmers who worked for the farm before. They were all skin and bones, and they worked so hard that their hands and feet cracked. The squires exploited them, and the imperial court imposed various exorbitant taxes on them. They didn't even have enough to eat a full meal, let alone save up money. Just by comparing the two, he could guess that even if the owner of this farm wasn't a good person, he wasn't evil either. The captain seemed to have a lot of prestige among them. After hearing his words, the others immediately felt relieved. When they took the big bag back and opened it, they found that the owner of the farm was better than they had imagined. Not only were there warm clothes to resist the night wind, bedding, life-saving medicinal herbs, and clean white cloth, there were even 2 portions of streaky pork wrapped in lotus leaves, weighing at least 5 caddies. Next to it were some small pieces of bones, which were the best for making soup. Apart from these bits and pieces of food, there were even a few earthenware bowls and chopsticks, a medicinal stove, and more than 2 buckets of rice. These things didn't look precious, but they were extremely meticulous. One of them had sharp eyes and even took out half a tael of silver from the folded bedding. Normally, any one of them would be able to afford these things. However, their lives had fallen to the lowest point, and they could only endure hunger and the torment of illness. It was said that it was easy to add flowers to a brocade, but difficult to provide charcoal in a snowy day. At this moment, he deeply understood the meaning of this saying. For a moment, even those who didn't like to cry the most had their eyes turn red. Why are all of you so hesitant? Go stew the meat, boil the bones into soup, and decoct the medicinal herbs. Don't delay. The captain, who Meng Liang called Meng Hun, was the first to recover from his gloomy mood. He passed the new bedding to the injured brothers. Although the cave they were hiding in was secluded, it was very cold and damp, and the ground was wet with puddles of water. They had no choice but to cover the ground with a layer of dry branches and haystacks. However, such a simple and crude environment was extremely unfavorable for healing. Now that they had good medicinal herbs, white cloth to change wounds, and warm bedding, it was like a dream. At least, the brothers in the cave had a chance to live. He didn't want to wake up the next day to find the corpses of his former brothers dead. Although there were no seasonings, the taste of the fresh, top-notch pork was still very good after being casually stewed in water. Then, he drank some soup made from the bones and accompanied it with the sticky rice porridge. A warm current flowed through his limbs, instantly giving him the illusion that he had returned to the human world from hell. Meng Hun's originally anxious heart gradually calmed down. Although he looked calm on the surface, his heart was in turmoil. He was afraid that these things had been tampered with. However, after checking, he found that there was nothing wrong with these things, and he couldn't help but feel a little ashamed. He was the one who had misunderstood the owner of the farm by gauging the heart of a gentleman with his own mean measure. "County Commandant, do you want to send someone to ask about that family tomorrow?" Since he had received their kindness, he naturally had to return it. Not to mention, this was a life-saving favor. Meng Hun gulped down the hot rice porridge and gritted his teeth. "Of course we have to ask. I, Meng Hun, haven't learned many words, but I know that a drop of water should be repaid with a spring of water. Today, he saved my brother. In the future, when I get my revenge, my life is his." Although he said so, his current identity could not be exposed. If he really had a relationship with that kind family, it would be easy to implicate them. This was not repaying kindness, but harming people. Meng Hun's name was Hun, but he was not. Speaking of revenge, one of them gritted his teeth. That bastard is very cunning. I don't know where he is hiding now. Meng Hun said without batting an eyelid, a dog can't stop eating sh*t. That bastard is still a bastard even if he is in a different place. Hejian County is a place that people from Zhangzhou have to pass on their way to Shangjing. Although it is a small place, it is a good place to raise beauties. That bastard hates being restrained by the elders in his family. Now that he is out of Meng County, Zhangzhou, there is no one around to restrain him. How can he give up the opportunity to hunt for beauties? As long as he stood guard here, he would definitely be able to catch that bastard. Actually, he and his brothers had been investigating for the past 2 days and had indeed found some useful information. Based on the evidence, it was highly possible that Meng Liang was already in Hejian County. Thinking of his wife and daughter who had died tragically, Meng Hun clenched his fists in anger. Blue veins popped out on his forehead. He wanted to tear Meng Liang alive with his bare hands. He was a retainer of the Mengs. He was destined to go through fire and water and serve the Mengs. There were hundreds of scars on his body. Which one of them was not caused by the Mengs? He had been on the brink of death several times, and which one was not because of the Mengs? He was not smart, and he did not know many words. He learned everything slowly, but he knew that he had to be grateful. He could not be two-faced and treacherous. Meng Hun was grateful for the care of the Mengs for his family. He wished he could give his heart to the Mengs in return. He was willing to be a pawn of the Mengs in this life, and he would do the same in the next life. But his loyalty was exchanged for the death of his wife and daughter. Chapter 144. The Internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. Meng Hun felt like his insides were burning when he thought of the despair his wife and daughter went through before they died. His eyes were bloodshot and his eyes were bloodshot. His anger was burning and gradually infected the others. The delicious hot soup in their mouths was tasteless. Captain, we'll have plenty of chances to get our revenge. The next time we see that bastard, Meng Liang, we'll cut him down as a sacrifice to our sister-in-law and niece's souls in heaven. The man raised his left hand and patted Meng Hun's shoulder. His right hand was injured. He had just cleaned the wound with clean water, applied medicine, and hung a white cloth around his neck. It was not convenient for him to move. Yeah, my sister-in-law and niece are watching from the heavens. They will definitely bless us to kill that little bastard Meng Liang. Good people deserve good things. Another man said in a low voice. He was clumsy and said whatever was on his mind. He was not good at comforting people. Meng Hun was woken up by the force on his shoulder. His face was still gloomy, but he did not continue to indulge in hatred. Seeing Meng Hun's reaction, the others could not help but feel worried. The person who had led them through life and death was this burly, 7-foot-tall man in front of them. The person who had stepped forward to save their lives in times of crisis was also this person. Even though he himself was living a hard life, he still took care of them from time to time. On the contrary, what did the Mengs do? Part of their glory and wealth was due to their ancestors, and the other part was the blood, sweat, and flesh of ordinary people. Therefore, when Meng Hun suppressed his emotions and said, "I want to rebel," they did not hesitate to follow him and rebel against the Mengs. Compared to the Mengs who relied on their ancestors, they trusted Meng Hun more. Good people deserve good things? Meng Hun murmured. He looked as if he had lost his soul. He buried his face in his palms. If good people were really rewarded, then how could his virtuous wife and quick-witted daughter end up like that? In the hidden cave, the men looked at each other in silence. They all had their own thoughts and tacitly did not disturb Meng Hun. The farm was shrouded in the moonlight and was silent. Nowadays, Su Ku could be considered as a trusted subordinate of the head of the family. He could be considered as the head of the farm. At night, he could light an oil lamp and use the light to organize the training records during the day as well as the various expenses of the farm. If he had enough time, he could even read some classics and history books. Today, after he was done with the accounts, he did not take out his book. Instead, he took off his cloak and draped it over his shoulders. He picked up the oil lamp on the table. Creak, raising his hand to block the wind from blowing out the oil lamp, he made his way to the cubicle next to the kitchen where the ingredients were stored. He lifted the lamp and took a closer look. Sure enough, the things he had prepared were gone. Even the footprints on the ground had been deliberately erased. The gift is light, but the sentiment is heavy. It's good that this gift can be delivered to the bottom of my heart. Su-ko looked around the cubicle, and a faint smile appeared on his face. Then, he looked a little worried. Tisk, although that's the case, I've spent 6 taels and 7 chien this time. He had used up more than half of it. If he had known earlier, he would have asked for more from Lang Jun. Su-ko frowned. He guarded the oil lamp, closed the cubicle door, and walked back to his room step by step. These days, ordinary people could only taste meat once a year on New Year's Day. The 2 bags of pork belly were expensive. Moreover, he had specially gone to the pharmacy to pick out the medicinal herbs and white cloth. The medicine was effective, but it was also expensive. Those brand new bedding, warm clothes, pottery utensils, and so on, all added up to 6 taels and 7 copper coins. He only hoped that he would not make a mistake this time. If he ended up with a one-way ticket. He felt that it would be hard to appease his Lang Jun, who loved to make trouble. When that time came, he would be the one to face her anger. Su-ko closed the door, blocking out the cold outside. Su-ko moved the charcoal basin slightly closer to himself. The coldness in his body suddenly lessened, and his stiff and cold hands and feet slowly warmed up. Let's see how those people react tomorrow. We'll know then. Su-ko muttered. He used the oil lamp to read a bamboo scroll that he had borrowed from Jiangpengji's study. Sometimes he frowned, and sometimes he had a sudden realization. He was so immersed in it that he forgot himself. The next morning, the gatekeeper of the Lus yawned as he walked out of the corner gate. Coincidentally, a simple and low-key carriage came from the entrance of the alley. The horse stopped, and the carriage stopped right in front of the Lus door. The gatekeeper rubbed his sleepy eyes and stared at the patterns on the carriage. The corresponding family immediately appeared in his mind. Wasn't that the carriage of the second Langjuan's teacher, Wei Gongchao? Wei Gongchao was so dedicated. He came to teach Lang Jun as soon as he recovered. The gatekeeper thought to himself. He asked someone to invite the housekeeper over while he went forward to welcome the guest. However, the person who came out of the carriage was not Wei Gongchao. It was a young man who looked to be in his 20s. The man was tall and wore a new scholarly robe. He had a cloak over his head, and his black hair was tied up neatly with a crown. Judging by his clothes, he should be a scholar. His height alone gave people a natural sense of oppression, not to mention the aura around him. His face was deeper than most people's. He didn't look like someone from the Central Plains, but more like someone from the northern borderline. The young man stepped on the stool and opened the curtain. The person who came out was Wei Gongchao, the teacher of the Lus. Mr. Gongchao, we have arrived at the Lus. Chiguan Rang still maintained his cold expression. Perhaps it was because of the light in the day, but the coldness in his eyes was not as strong as it was at night. Wei Gongchao looked up at the sky and then at the Lus closed door. Only the corner door was slightly open. The servants saw Wei Yuan and thought that he was there to teach Lang Jun. Who would have thought that he was there to resign? Lu Shi's sleepiness disappeared when he heard the reason for Wei Yuan's visit. He looked serious. But my son is naughty. How did he offend you? Even though he had tacitly agreed to let Jiang Pengji study in Langyi, he did not expect Wei Yuan to come to him to resign. He thought about it and his heart skipped a beat. He was afraid that Jiang Pengji had said something to Wei Yuan in private. Offending someone was secondary. More importantly, Wei Yuan's status and reputation among the Dongqing scholars was not low. If there was no reasonable explanation for the matter, based on the current situation, his daughter was not in the right. A teacher for a day, a father for life. Being a teacher was also a form of filial piety. Wei Yuan smiled. Zhongqing, you don't have to be like this. This is the result of my careful consideration. It's not that Lanting is bad. Qiguan rank status and age were not high enough to interrupt their conversation. He simply sat behind Wei Yuan and acted as a backdrop. Qiguan Rang was also surprised that Wei Yuan had brought him to the Lus. He knew that Wei Yuan saw him as his future son-in-law, but it was beyond his expectations that he would be treated so well. Chapter 145. Lu Shi had already noticed the young man behind Wei Yuan. His heart was as clear as a mirror. Wei Yuan didn't bring the unfamiliar young man over to visit his relatives or simply to go through the motions. He most likely wanted to act as a middleman to introduce them to the young man. However, the topic was about resignation. It had nothing to do with the young man. Wei Yuan laughed bitterly and laughed at himself. Lu Zhongqing, do you really have to tear me apart before you're happy? Lanting isn't bad, but you know my temperament. You also know Lanting's temperament. If I continue to teach her, won't I mislead her? You won't be able to get even with me in the future. It's better for me to resign now. But... Lu Shi hesitated. Lanting studies, we've been teacher and student for a few years. I hope that one day, Lanting can be famous. As Wei Yuan spoke, he took out a letter of recommendation that he had written earlier from his sleeve. Lu Shi looked suspicious. He took the letter and was shocked. How can Lanting become Master Yuanjing's student with that little ability of hers? Wei Yuan shook his head. It's not that Lanting has to be Master Yuanjing's student. After all, that person has a strange temperament. You and I have heard about him. Lanting might not be able to like him. It's just that there are many talented people in Langyi County. There are as many scholars as there are stars in the sky. It's easy to make friends. At Lanting's age, she should learn to go out and visit friends. She shouldn't be cooped up at home. Although it was good to have a talented teacher at home for one-on-one instruction, there were many drawbacks. Wei Yuan always felt that his student's temperament was too introverted and shy. She didn't have any good friends or playmates of the same age. She stayed at home all day and refused to move. He didn't know that there was a special term for people like her who didn't go out all year round. If she continued to stay at home, she would definitely grow mold and mushrooms would grow. It would be great if Lu Shi could make a trip to Langyi. It would be best if he could become a disciple of the Master of the Abyss. If there was no other way, Lu Shi could study in Langyi Academy and make more friends. This would be very helpful for his future career. The officialdom was not a place that could be explored alone. If Lu Shi was just an ordinary aristocrat, as his son, Lu Shi would only need to be slightly more successful than him. However, the reality was that Lu Shi was famous in Dongqing and even the 5 countries. He had made countless enemies in the officialdom. This was a bit embarrassing. Lu Shi's political enemies couldn't do anything to his father, but couldn't they do something to his son? Even a fool knew that one had to pick the softest persimmon. In the future, Lu Shi would only be obsessed with literature. It would be fine if he did not get involved in politics, but once he did, he would immediately have a row of natural political enemies. In order to have an easier road in the future, it was important to start building connections now. How could Lu Shi not understand that Wei Yuan was thinking about Jiang Pengji? Even if Wei Yuan hadn't come to ask for his resignation, he would have waited for Wei Yuan's condition to improve before taking the initiative to visit him. Now that Wei Yuan had taken the initiative to step forward, it saved them a lot of unnecessary trouble. Lu Shi naturally wanted to return the favor. "My stubborn son has troubled you, brother Gongqiao," Lu Shi said with a sigh. He carefully accepted Wei Yuan's recommendation letter. "We haven't seen each other for many years. I wonder if brother Gongqiao would be willing to stay for lunch and drink with me?" Wei Yuan and Lu Shi weren't that close in the past. They weren't close friends, but they were closer than ordinary friends. "Since you've asked, how can I refuse?" Wei Yuan stroked his beard with a satisfied smile. Lu Shi's reaction was within his expectations. Lu Shi was about to get up and order some food and wine. It was only then that he noticed the young man next to Wei Yuan. He looked a little surprised and teased, "Are you a descendant of brother Gongcao's family?" Qiguan Rang had been looking down respectfully. When he heard Lu Shi mention him, he cupped his hands and bowed. Wei Yuan stroked his beard and smiled. "I'm not a descendant of my family, but I'm close." Lu Shi's heart skipped a beat. He knew that this was probably Wei Yuan's son-in-law candidate. His interest was piqued and he carefully examined the young man. To judge a person, one didn't just have to look at their appearance. More importantly, one had to look at their spirit. It could be said to be their temperament or their aura. Some people could wear mulberry linen with a leather brocade. Others, even if they wore gold and jade, looked like beggars on the side of the road. After a closer look, Lu Shi exclaimed, "I don't know where brother Gongqiao found him. He's an outstanding young man." Wei Yuan's cheeks were flushed with joy when Lu Shi praised his son-in-law. He was proud of himself. Qiguan Rang didn't say anything. He just clenched his fists in his sleeves. Even if he could calmly plot to kill someone, how could he stay calm in front of the only person in Dongqing he had approved of, an idol? Wei Yuan smiled and waved his hand, saying that Lu Shi was praising him too much. "How should I address you?" Lu Shi didn't put on airs. Instead, he seemed very approachable. The question was directed at Qiguan Rang. It wasn't convenient for Wei Yuan to answer. He brought Qiguan Rang here to let him have a look at Lu Shi. He couldn't help him with everything. "I'm Qiguan Rang. Greetings, Chief Lu." Lu Shi was silent for a while. Then, he asked with a smile, "Where do you live? Where are you from?" "Shangyu from the northern borderline," Qiguan Rang answered. Lu Shi looked down. His expression became more serious. His voice became softer. "Do you have a courtesy name?" "My master has taken it." "Courtesy name Wenzheng." Lu Shi was speechless. Right now, he really wanted to be alone. Don't ask him who Jing Jing was. Qiguan Rang, courtesy name Wenzheng, from the northern borderline. He lost his wife at a young age, that was what he knew. There was nothing special about him. What was special was that he was unusually ruthless and cunning. A few years later, in order to help his master make up her mind to rebel against Dongqing, he burned down Shangyang Palace and killed all the men in the royal family of Dongqing. Of course, that wasn't the point. The point was that he was one of the few people who had defeated Emperor Chen, Lu Shi. 3 cities were lost in a row. It wasn't because the latter didn't have enough troops. It was because Qiguan Rang was too cunning and cunning. If that was the case, Lu Shi wouldn't have wanted to be alone. According to Ah Min, although this person was talented, the lord he served was indecisive. People said that he was soft and did not have a mind of his own. In the end, another strategist took advantage of the situation and caused Qiguan Rang to lose his trust. Instead, he was put under house arrest and abandoned. What was the result? Qiguan Rang set up a trap in the prison and put his master in a hopeless situation. On the day the city was conquered, he personally opened the gate to welcome the new master, you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.